Chapter 1625. Jiang Pengji's streaming room was a mix of good and bad people, gays, and sluts emerged one after another. When they found out that the content of the streaming was no longer about boring government affairs, but about hormones, they couldn't stand it anymore. A group of losers clamored to F***ck Yang Tao, but the most improper ones were the gays and sluts, who stared at the bulge under Yang Tao's tight abdominal muscles and blushed. In contrast, Jiang Pengji didn't get much attention. They saw that face every day, and he wouldn't show his abdominal muscles to them. Yang Tao, the little angel, was a real warrior. He was super generous, and people blushed. Not only were the gays and sluts clamoring to push Yang Tao down, but a group of weak salted fish also followed the crowd and shouted slogans. Aod Leming, if I'm the next emperor of fortune, I'll tear off Yang Tao's underpants. Xinshi Simi Cha. After watching the analysis of the gods in the streaming room, I feel a deep sense of inferiority. Didn't they say that men in ancient times didn't eat well? Their food was not nutritious, so they weren't tall, had bad looks, and were out of shape. But Yang Tao was such a man? Tai Di Chengjing. If I could transmigrate, I'd like to be in Yang Tao's underpants and flirt with him every day. Jiang Pengji looked at the group of people who did not have the slightest AC and shook her head secretly. Yang Tao could lift them up with one hand, spin them around twice, and then throw them out. Who gave them the confidence to push him down and say they were going to F***ck him? Jiang Pengji's control of her expression was as pure as fire. Even though she complained in her heart, Yang Tao didn't notice anything. He took out 2 jars of liquor from the cabin and gave one to each of them. I never thought I'd be on the same boat as Master Lu and drink with him. Is it hard to imagine? Jiang Pengji said, I think it's within expectations. It's nothing new. Yang Tao carefully pondered over her words and heard the arrogance and confidence in them. When he said he never thought about it, it meant that he never thought he would lose to Jiang Pengji, and it also meant that he would be put in an important position after losing to Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji's answer was straightforward. She firmly believed that she would win against Yang Tao. Yang Tao's failure was within her expectations. Sigh, he was such an annoying person, but he wasn't beaten to death with a sack. Yang Tao had a good temper, but he still wanted to beat Jiang Pengji up. It could be seen how much people loved and hated her. Did Lord Lu have such a temper when he was young? Jiang Pengji finished half a jar of liquor in one breath. She propped her upper body up with her hands behind her back. Her feet were submerged in the river. Her clothes were half wet and half dry and stuck to her skin, vaguely outlining her wonderful figure. However, most of her body was covered by the cloak. Yang Tao didn't pay much attention to women other than his wife, and the guards didn't dare look straight at her. Salted fish was only focused on licking Yang Tao's abs, so no one paid her any attention. What do you think? Yang Tao smiled. If Lord Lu had such a temper when he was young, he probably wouldn't have lived to this day. This kind of temperament was too infuriating. Jiang Pengji smiled, revealing her white teeth. Her smile seemed to be more radiant than the scorching sun above her head. How could that be? When I was young, my personality was much worse than it is now. When I grow up, I will also become more mature. She wasn't lying. She did have a bad temper when she was young. In the words of some of her old comrades, every time she looked at someone, her gaze was as if they owed her $5 million. She was silent and sinister. It was just that the image of a quiet iceberg was fine, but once she opened her mouth, she was a chatterbox. She talked until people's hearts were made of glass. Yang Tao smiled awkwardly. Now she was considered mature and steady. How mischievous was Jiang Pengji when she was young? The two of them drank more than 10 jars of liquor. Yang Tao was drunk on the 3rd jar. Although his alcohol tolerance was good, it was based on sake. The after effects of the liquor were not something that could be compared to the sake that had been blended with water. Although hard liquor was good, one should not drink it too much. Jiang Pengji drank the rest of the liquor alone and casually threw the jar into the river. After enjoying the breeze of the river for a long time, she said to the guards, "Let's go back. Remember to boil some soup to sober him up so that he won't catch a cold." When the group of people reached the shore, Jiang Pengji's clothes were almost dry. She raised her hand and hung the god-slaying sword on her waist, returning to her normal attire. She leaped onto the horse's back and was about to give the order to return when her brows suddenly jumped. Under the sunlight, her brown eyes flashed with a hint of danger. "Wait, the god said. Do you have any instructions, my lord? Zhang Pengji said. You bring Yang Tao back by water. I want to walk alone. The guards looked at each other and said hesitantly, the military counselors have repeatedly reminded us not to let the Lord be alone. Zhang Pengji smiled and tightened the reins. The corners of her lips curled indifferently. Am I the Lord, or are they the Lord? Her voice was neither light nor heavy, but it revealed a bit of chilling sternness. The guards knelt on one knee and did not dare to raise their heads. When they came back to their senses, they were shocked to find that the clothes on their backs were drenched in sweat. I just want to be alone and hunt some prey to go back. I will catch up with you soon. Just report to the military counselors. The guards did not dare to hesitate and could only follow Zhang Pengji's orders. They did not have the guts to ask Zhang Pengji why she sent them away to hunt alone, but the salted fish were not afraid. Zhang Pengji said, there is an ambush ahead. If they follow me, they will only drag me down. Other than dying, they will not contribute anything else. She did not hide her disdain. The salted fish were speechless. There was an ambush nearby? To be precise, there was an ambush in the forest ahead. Everyone knew that Zhang Pengji was a maverick lord. She loved hunting and drinking. Every time she was free, she would bring people to hunt. It was common for her to hunt alone. She dared to do so because she was skilled and daring. There were people in this world who could assassinate her, but those people were in another world. Based on the combat power of this world alone, she had never been afraid. But others did not think so, especially the enemy. Xueqi Guofengxiu. I suddenly have an idea. If someone prophesied that she is light and unprepared, although he has millions of men, he will be walking alone in the Central Plains. Like an assassin lying in ambush, he will be alone. In my opinion, he will die in the hands of an ordinary man. He will probably be slapped in the face? Tudu Feichio, how is it probably? He will definitely be slapped in the face. He will be so swollen that even his own mother can't recognize him. How could an assassin be enough for Zhang Pengji's combat power? If he did not bring a mighty army of more than 10,000, how could he touch the hem of her clothes? The salted fish closed their eyes and mocked Zhang Pengji. She wore a red robe and tied her hair into a high ponytail. She held a bow in her left hand and a god-slaying sword hung on her waist. She went into the depths of the dense forest alone. When she easily hunted down 2 deer, she heard the faint sound of arrows piercing through the air. These hidden arrows were all smeared with poison. Every one of them was aimed at her vital parts. The assassin saw that she did not respond and was secretly delighted. But the corner of his mouth had just curled up halfway when he froze. Zhang Pengji, who should have been shot and fallen, did not fall. He took a closer look and saw that the other party was holding a familiar arrow in her right hand. Chapter 1626. Qing Feng Wenpu. There's really an assassination. Are they lining up to be killed? Huahua, don't be strong. The world is so beautiful. Isn't it good to be alive? Why did you come here to court death? Tang Shisong Ci. I can feel the host's murderous intent through the screen. Other people would panic when they encounter an assassination, but she is different. She is eager to try. Sigh, even though I'm super scared, I won't leave just because of the host's looks and skills. Fairy Queen's Crimson. I'm waiting for the streamer to go on a killing spree and smash the heads of these killers. They were even more excited than Zhang Pengji. They couldn't wait to see her deal with the assassins. Zhang Pengji did not disappoint them. She crushed the arrow in her hand with a little force. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. The assassins hiding in the forest exchanged glances, and in the next second, they heard the sound of weapons being unsheathed. Kill. No matter how the outside world described Zhang Pengji's bravery, those who had not seen it with their own eyes would never believe it, especially when Zhang Pengji's figure was so deceiving. Who could have imagined that such a tall but not burly female body would have such powerful combat strength? A battle on the battlefield was different from a small-scale confrontation. The former emphasized the aesthetics of violence and did not have any techniques to speak of, while the latter relied more on techniques and cooperation. Zhang Pengji was alone and had no guards by her side, but the killers were specially trained men of sacrifice. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious. Zhang Pengji looked coldly at the enemies rushing out of the dense forest and sneered disdainfully. With a swoosh, she unsheathed the god-slaying saber. Facing the killers that were coming at her from all directions, She did not retreat. Instead, she advanced. She even felt a little pleased. Her reaction made the killer dumbfounded. Was the Duke of Lanting not joking? While he was still in a daze, the blade was already in front of him. Her knife was extremely fast. Before the killer who bore the brunt of the attack could feel any pain, his neck was already kissed by the blade. Just a second ago, the assassin was still thinking about how to kill the enemy, but in the next second, he felt a chill in his throat. Someone's blood was spurting out, dyeing everything in sight red. The world spun around him, and his body fell to the ground with a dull thud. A question popped up in the killer's mind. Why did the surrounding temperature drop so much? Why did the sky suddenly darken? Why does my neck hurt so much? He tried to open his mouth to say something, but he couldn't even sigh. Of course, Jiang Pengji did not care what the assassin was thinking before he died. She only knew that the god-slaying sword was trembling with excitement. This saber had been wronged following him. It wasn't easy for him to get a taste of meat, so he naturally had to kill to his heart's content. Of course, she knew that capturing the killers alive was better than killing them. If there was no one to command them, the killers wouldn't have ambushed Jiang Pengji for no reason. However, there was no reason to reject the heads that came to her. It was the same to leave one or two of them alive. There were a total of 100 assassins in this group, and every one of them was a meticulously trained death warrior. It was impossible to raise them unless one was from a noble family. Nurturing a qualified killer not only required a large amount of resources, but also a considerable amount of manpower and energy. Ordinary rich families could not afford to raise high-quality death warriors. Jiang Pengji roughly knew their origins as soon as they fought. They were most likely related to the Nanxing aristocrats. Jiang Pengji was mentally prepared that they would send someone to assassinate her. The ancient people of this era could not even accept cremation. They firmly believed that cremation meant dying without a complete corpse, being smashed to pieces, and desecrating the dead. The higher the family, the more they were particular about it. They could not even accept cremation, not to mention Jiang Pengji digging up their ancestors' graves and plundering the deceased's gold, silver, and funerary objects. Even if she had 1,000 or 10,000 reasons, Jiang Pengji had still offended them. They did not make a move earlier because they were not confident that Jiang Pengji would be heavily guarded. What about now? She had courted death by bringing a few guards out for a winter hunt. Unfortunately, Yang Tao was with her. If they could assassinate Jiang Pengji and frame Yang Tao for the crime, they would be able to wash their hands clean and watch Jiang Pengji's power fall apart with a smile. These ideas were not bad, but they had to be based on the premise that Jiang Pengji was really assassinated. As long as Jiang Pengji did not die, these wishful thinking could only be a calculation and not a reality. If there were bystanders watching from the dense forest, they would see a red figure shuttling and dodging among the killers at a speed that ordinary people could not achieve. Every time the blade struck, a bloody arc would be drawn and a fresh life would be taken away. No matter how the killers shot arrows in the dark, besieged, or plotted against her, Jiang Pengji was unscathed. She was even more slippery than a loach. From the dense forest came the jarring sound of swords and knives clashing. At the same time, a group of guards followed Jiang Pengji's orders and sent Yang Tao back via the waterway. Dusk fell. The temperature of the water was colder than on land. Yang Tao suddenly shivered and woke up in a daze. "What time is it now?" Yang Tao asked vaguely. The guard reported respectfully. Yang Tao nodded in a daze. He sat on the deck for a while before regaining some of his senses. Where is Master Lu? He remembered that he had drunk a lot of wine. His head was still hurting. Before he passed out, he remembered that Master Lu drank more than him. The god hesitated and said, "The Lord went hunting. She specially ordered us to escort you back." Yang Tao subconsciously said, "Ah." He did not suspect anything, but he quickly figured out that something was wrong. The number of guards that Jiang Pengji brought out was not reduced. The number of guards that she brought out was not reduced either. These guards were all here. Was there anyone else around Jiang Pengji? Yang Tao did not expect Jiang Pengji to be so bold as to jump around alone. He did not think of this for a moment. "Did Master Lu say when she will return?" The god said. "I don't know." Yang Tao asked. "She didn't say?" "It's getting dark. It's not safe outside. If they did not go back soon, someone might cause trouble." Even though she was a feudal lord, Jiang Pengji seemed to have access restrictions. If she spent the night outside without informing her, wouldn't the civil and military officials in her camp go crazy? The guard looked troubled. He said hesitantly, "The Lord did not bring anyone with her. She did not say when she will return." Yong Tao did not react for a moment. It took him a while to digest the guard's words. Did not bring anyone? What do you mean by did not bring anyone? Yong Tao's voice rose an octave. The guard lowered his head even more. The Lord does not like to have people following her. This time. Do you know how many people in this world want her life? Even if she wants your lives, you can't leave your posts without permission. Yong Tao was completely shocked. At the same time, he sobered up. His tone was stern, which was rare. Order Master Lu to turn around immediately. Chapter 16:27. Although Yong Tao's order was for Jiang Pengji's own good, it went against Jiang Pengji's previous orders, so the guards did not dare to act. What are you standing there for? Yong Tao could not understand the guards' actions. If something really happened to someone, it would be fine if they took the blame, but they just had to drag him down with them. Yong Tao did not want to lose his life because of this. It would be too unjust to die, the guard said awkwardly. We have no choice but to obey the Lord's orders. If the Lord pursues this matter, Yong Tao asked in return, if something really happens to Lord Lu, who among you can shoulder the responsibility? Seeing that the guards did not give a definite answer, Yong Tao snatched the oar from the boatman's hands. You can't disobey Lord Lu's orders, and I won't force you. I'll go on my own. You can return on your own. The guards looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they were in a dilemma. After all, the Lord's orders were for them to bring Yong Tao back via the waterway. If Yong Tao refused to cooperate, no one would be able to back down. After hesitating for a while, the guards still plucked up their courage and obeyed Yong Tao's orders. They turned around to look for Jiang Pengji. Firstly, if they were reprimanded by the Lord, at least Yong Tao would take the blame. Even if she got angry, they would not be directed at them. Secondly, as Yong Tao said, if something happened to the Lord while she was alone, they would not be able to absolve themselves of the blame. Yong Tao was in a hurry to rush back to look for Jiang Pengji, but he did not forget about other things. Send someone to pass the news back first. They had been out for so long, but they had not sent back any news. He did not know how anxious Wei Si and the others were. Yes. Because Yong Tao had ordered them to turn around, the boatman also tried his best to row the oar. The boat moved very fast. The oncoming wind from the river slapped his face. For a moment, he sobered up from his drunkenness. He only felt perturbed and worried. Night fell, and the last ray of the afterglow fell into the horizon. Yong Tao could only ask the guards to light a torch. They followed the traces left by Jiang Pengji and found the dense forest. Wait. What is this smell? Yong Tao's nose was more sensitive. Before the group entered the dense forest, they could already smell the familiar smell of blood. He couldn't believe it and tried to sniff. The closer he got, the stronger the smell of blood became. Under the light of the torch, the guard also found that there were many traces of human activity in the forest, such as messy footsteps and bushes and weeds that were crushed by heavy objects. Yong Tao looked at the depth of the footsteps and the degree of dryness of the soil. He was sure that these footsteps were left here recently. There were many people. The more he looked, the more frightened he became. Yong Tao couldn't tell what his current state of mind was, because his mind had gone blank. Search. Search for all of them. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Yong Tao was suppressing his emotions that were about to go out of control, but the hoarseness in his voice exposed his inner thoughts. Not long after, the guard came back to report that a corpse had been eaten by wild beasts in the forest. Yong Tao hurried over and found a few corpses on the ground that had been dragged and eaten by wild beasts. Heads, torsos, limbs. Every part of the body with more muscle and fat had been eaten by the hungry beasts. The white bones under the skin and flesh were exposed. It made one's scalp go numb. The clothes of the deceased were also eaten by wild beasts, but from the remains of the skeleton and clothes, it could be determined that it was a man. It's not my lord. As soon as the guard finished speaking, Yong Tao replied, I'm not blind. I can tell if it's a man or a woman. Who are these people? Could they be men of sacrifice? He guessed correctly. The guard said solemnly, According to the traces left on these corpses, they are indeed well-trained men of sacrifice. These corpses haven't started to stink. The corpses are slightly hardened, and the blood is fresh. I estimate that they died less than half an hour ago. Less than half an hour ago? Didn't that mean that they died not long ago? Yang Tao's face was darker than the night. A group of men of sacrifice who had just died appeared here, and it happened to be a sensitive time when Jiang Pengji was alone. How could he not be worried? Whether it was Yang Tao or the guards, they all knew that Jiang Pengji had most likely been assassinated. However, there were no traces of her yet. They couldn't determine whether she was unscathed, injured and hidden, or, unfortunately, dead. He didn't dare to delay. Except for 2 guards, the others were sent to look for Jiang Pengji. The guards followed the traces of the wild beasts dragging the corpses and found the place where the scuffle had taken place. There were more corpses here. When the guards arrived, there were pairs of glowing eyes in the darkness. Everyone saw the scene clearly with the help of the torch and suddenly gasped. This was a group of wild wolves that hadn't eaten their fill since the beginning of winter. They were probably attracted by the smell of blood from the corpses and ate their fill from the corpses. When the crowd approached, those with sharp ears could even hear the stirring sound of the wild wolves' sharp teeth gnawing on human flesh and bones. Probably because they had eaten their fill, the leader of the wolf pack didn't want to fight with the guards. The 2 sides were in a stalemate for a while. Then, with a howl, the wolf pack left. Looking at the pairs of glowing eyes disappearing into the darkness, 2 of the guards came back to their senses and were shocked to find that they were covered in sweat. When the cold wind blew, their sweaty skin turned cold. It was so cold that they couldn't help but shiver. Yang Tao rushed over when he heard the news. Looking at the messy scene, his expression was extremely solemn. "Did you find any traces of Lord Liu?" the guard said. The fatal injuries on the men of sacrifice were all left by the long sword. Every slash was so neat and sharp. Only the god-slaying sword in the Lord's hand can do that. We checked the surrounding area for miles. Other than these men of sacrifice, we didn't find any traces of the Lord, Yang Tao said. "Where is she?" "You didn't find Lord Liu?" The guard hesitated for a while and said, "Perhaps the Lord has already gone back?" Yang Tao pointed at the corpses all over the ground and said, "A rough estimate is at least 100 people. Do you think these men of sacrifice are useless?" In his opinion, even if Jiang Pengji was still alive, she was most likely injured and hiding somewhere. They had to find her quickly. The leader of the guards blinked and said hesitantly, "Perhaps they are really useless." "You're still arguing with me?" Yang Tao was furious at the guards who were not skilled in their work. Jiang Pengji was one of the most powerful dukes in the world. Couldn't she find a group of professional and responsible guards? What are these meticulously trained men of sacrifice doing? What are you guys doing? Eating rotten rice? Hurry up and find them. He was so angry that he was going to have a heart attack. The guards had no choice but to continue their search. But they searched all over the mountain and found no traces of their lord. If she was really injured and hiding, shouldn't she have left some clues for them to follow? Yang Tao fed the mosquitoes for half the night. Jiang Pengji leisurely strolled home on her horse. She hadn't even sat down for long when Yan Lin came to ask for her. Chapter 1628. Jiang Pengji chatted with salted fish along the way. When she returned, the sky was completely dark. She didn't turn off the streaming room. Instead, she gossiped with them to kill time. The chef in the residence served the dishes that had been kept warm. Jiang Pengji wasn't picky. There were 6 meat dishes, 3 vegetable dishes, and 2 soup dishes. She ate like a table full of people. Especially when the maid served the rice buckets that were the size of a wash basin, the bullet screen was stunned. AOD Lemming, a day apart feels like 3 years, but the streamer has turned into a rice bucket. Who eats with a wash basin as a unit of measurement? 7 or 8 strong men might not be able to finish the rice alone. Her appetite is really shocking. Tudu Faccio. Sigh, the streamer didn't have such a big appetite in the past. I saw her eat 1.5 rice buckets for lunch with my own eyes. I used my wash basin to measure it. TSK. This is probably a real rice bucket. Kissing Kekiongtang, if the streamer transmigrates to our world one day, I suggest she become a foodie streamer. It's much better than the Palace Intrigue streaming room that sells dog meat. The palace intrigue that I've been looking forward to for more than 10 years has actually disappeared. What was the equivalent of this operation? It was equivalent to a web novel that had been serialized for 1,600 pages and had yet to enter the main topic. Be careful that the readers didn't finish it. Handsome lowly. How can you say that? If my streamer really transmigrates, will she still be a foodie streamer? Do you think the food that a foodie streamer eats is free? Does the streaming equipment cost money? If she was willing to give the baby a kiss, it would really be free. It wasn't the first time Jiang Pengji was complained about her large appetite. It couldn't be helped. This body needed more and more energy every day as she trained and grew over the years. The energy contained in ordinary food couldn't keep up with the body's needs, so she could only rely on quantity to make up for quality. Anyway, she was a feudal lord. Even if she ate 10 or 20 basin-sized rice buckets for a meal, she could still afford it. At that moment, Jiang Pengji saw a complaint that was trending. Jing-ying. Fortunately, we didn't go to the palace intrigue. With the streamer's appetite, any emperor would be scared to retreat, right? According to the palace intrigue dramas they watched, wasn't the empress a cat's stomach? Jiang Pengji's figure was indeed quite good, but she had a good appetite. Imagine if the emperor came to the back palace to have a meal with her. The emperor would reservedly eat half a bowl of rice, but Jiang Pengji would finish all the dishes and gobble down 2 buckets of rice. No matter how beautiful she was or how powerful she was, the emperor would be so scared that he wouldn't be able to get hard, right? Jiang Pengji was amused by the comment. If she didn't have enough self-control, she might have spat out the rice and affected her appetite. When they finished half a bucket of rice, a servant reported that Yan Lin was outside the manor and asked to see her. Jiang Pengji let him in. When Yan Lin arrived, he saw Jiang Pengji holding a bowl in her left hand and a pair of chopsticks in her right. The maids were scooping rice for her. Each bowl was piled high with rice grains. The man looked up at him with an innocent and confused look, as if he was asking Yan Lin why he was here. Have you eaten? Jiang Pengji asked familiarly, then immediately corrected herself. I mean, have you eaten? Yan Lin tried his best to ignore the empty rice bucket and said calmly, I've used it in the mansion. Oh, then why are you looking for me? Jiang Pengji didn't like people interrupting her when she was eating and disrupting the flow of her meal. Yan Lin said seriously, Do you know where Xiaoyang went? I heard that he went out with Xiaoyang this afternoon. The system in this era was a pain in the ass. An official's official was not necessarily an official's official. Yan Lin was loyal to Yang Tao, so he was Yang Tao's official, not Jiang Pengji's. Because of Yang Tao's special status, Jiang Pengji didn't mind calling him Lord, but Yang Tao felt uncomfortable, so he used Lord Lu instead. Of course, other than Lord Lu, others could also call her Lord of Liuzhou, Lord Lanting, or Lord Ming. There were many ways to address her, but Jiang Pengji's officials and generals all liked to call her Lord. They had gotten used to it after so many years. Yan Lin and the others followed Yang Tao's lead and called her Lord Lu, so Jiang Pengji let them be. I'll just make do with it. What else can I do? Jiang Pengji was surprised by Yan Lin's question. Xiaoyang didn't come back? I don't think so. He left before me, and he took the water route. Yan Lin looked serious. If I may ask, what did Lord Lu and Xiaoyang do in the afternoon? Jiang Pengji said, Drink. What else could they have done? Yan Lin was speechless. Jiang Pengji continued, Xiaoyang can't hold his liquor well. He got drunk after 2 jars of hard liquor. I asked the guards to escort him up the river and came back first. I took the land route and hunted some wild animals along the way. I caught 2 ungrateful animals alive and wasted a lot of time on the road. Calculating the distance, Xiaoyang should have more than enough time to take a bath and take a nap. Why hasn't he come back yet? Yan Lin said seriously, I've searched everywhere, but I still haven't found any trace of Xiaoyang. Jiang Pengji's expression changed. Did something happen to Yan Lin? Just in case, the ambushing death warriors not only set up an ambush in the forest, but also on the river? She put down her bowl and chopsticks and led Yan Lin to find Wei Ci and the others. They were looking for Jiang Pengji as well. Why are you looking for me? Wei Ci, Feng Zhen, and the others were livid. It was fine that his lord had slipped away, and it was fine that she had brought Yang Tao to swim and drink with him, but she had actually ditched her guards and was alone. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Oh no, she was exposed. After figuring out the whole story, Feng Zhen and the others sent someone to inform Yang Tao, who was feeding mosquitoes in the forest, to come back. As soon as Yang Tao came back, they couldn't hide anything. For example, the Lord had ditched the guards and was alone, or the Lord had been ambushed by hundreds of men of sacrifice. Jiang Pengji was sitting in the main seat, but she had the illusion that she was being interrogated by 3 courts. She glared at Yang Tao, but he lowered his head and scratched the swelling on the back of his hand. The forest was too dirty. Even though there were no mosquitoes in this season, there were other insects. If one was not careful and got bitten, the skin that was exposed to the air would also swell. The more he scratched, the more itchy it was. Yan Lin secretly passed him a small bottle of ointment. If General Yang hadn't come back, when would the Lord have told us about the ambush? Wei Ci seemed to be angry, and his aura was especially strong. Jiang Pengji was in the wrong, so she couldn't help but feel guilty. I was going to talk about it after dinner. Speaking of which, she hadn't finished her meal because of Yan Lin's interruption. Wei Ci was choked by her answer. She was being ambushed by hundreds of men of sacrifice, and she was thinking about talking about it after dinner. Chapter 1629. Wei Ci tried hard to keep the expression on his face, but the idle spectators could read something else from his expression. Tudu Feiqiu, Zixiao's feelings right now are probably indescribable. He's smiling on the outside and maintaining his gentle appearance, but he's probably cursing inside. There was a saying that went, even if the person you chose is mentally retarded, you still have to kneel down and assist him. Hong Kong Guazaran. The streamer's operation is so sexy. Beauty Ci really loves the streamer by not punching her to death. Guoqian Li. Since all of you are pitying Beauty Ci, then I will pity the unlucky force that sent out the assassins. They were ambitious and wanted to take the host's life, but they never expected that the host's mind was only thinking about food. At the very least, he should respect the antagonist. He was quite serious about his work. Warrior rose. Haha, maybe the poor villain is waiting for the good news that the host is seriously injured or dead? The salted fish rejoiced in her misfortune. They knew Jiang Pengji's combat ability best. 100 or so kamikaze warriors could only make up one PUBG match. Did they really think they could kill her with such a small scale? What a joke! Even if Jiang Pengji was thrown in front of 99 cheats, they would still be able to win the game unscathed, let alone such a weak game. Therefore, the salted fishes giggled and copied a few bullet screen comments. Ruo Yunhui. Host, don't be a coward. You're the head of a family and an old woman. What's the point of being afraid of your wife? Xingyuan Miao Miao. Host, stay where you are and don't move. I will buy you the sharpest durian, the most uncomfortable keyboard, and the longest washboard. I guarantee that you will kneel comfortably and sincerely. Maybe Ci Marin will allow you to climb onto the bed because you are serious. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Were these salted fishes fans or haters of her? Or was it that the deeper the fan went, the darker it became? Even though salted fish cheered her on and encouraged her, Jiang Pengji was still a little cowardly when faced with the angry Wei Ci. When it came to matters of principle, she was naturally the one who had the final say. Wei Ci would also not argue with her on such matters, but when it came to trivial matters or logistics, Wei Ci was usually the one who had the final say. Jiang Pengji rarely argued with Wei Ci because of such things. Wei Ci's character also determined that he would not easily get angry. However, the more good-tempered a person was, the more oppressive their aura would be when they were angry. Jiang Pengji was at fault in the first place, so she was terrified. Not only that, she even tried to blink her eyes and act cute to get away with it. I really plan to talk about this after dinner. Jiang Pengji's voice became softer and softer as she spoke. She looked as if she had been wronged. Feng Zhen sighed. He couldn't bear to see Wei Ci being too forceful and causing his relationship with his lord to become strained, so he spoke up to interrupt. Has the lord finished eating? Jiang Pengji shook her head and said, No, I'm only 30% full. When everyone heard the words only 30% full, they subconsciously felt a little moved. Their lord was still hungry. However, when he thought about his lord's appetite, even if this 30% full was a few bowls of rice, Yang Tao muttered in a low voice, being controlled like this, not even having enough to eat, this lord is really aggrieved. Yan Lin rolled his eyes at Yang Tao and sneered. At least he ate more than half a bucket of rice. Don't talk about eating dinner. You've been feeding the worm blood for the whole night. Young Tao was speechless. He always felt that after he became the Lord, the frequency of his companions criticizing him had increased. It wasn't like this in the past. Even though Jiang Pengji wasn't full, they wouldn't let her go back to eat before coming back to settle the matter of the ambush. Ordinary gentry families couldn't have mobilized such a large number of men of sacrifice. If Jiang Pengji didn't handle it well, it would intimidate the thieves and evildoers. In the future, all kinds of monsters would dare to mess with the Lord. In order to make an example out of others, the assassination had to be cleansed with blood. Yang Si didn't think it was messy enough. He laughed and said, "It's just a bunch of unruly people." Even after mobilizing more than 100 men of sacrifice, they couldn't hurt the Lord at all. The assassination has become a joke. Why should the Lord care about them? In comparison, the Lord's meal is more important. Why don't you go to the back hall and have your meal first? We'll wait for you here. We'll discuss matters after the Lord finishes eating. Jiang Pengji's mouth twitched. She wanted to kick Yang Si. Did this guy want to see the world in chaos? Yang Si's every word sounded like flattery, but in fact, he was adding fuel to the fire and ridiculing her. How could Jiang Pengji dare to eat? She said seriously, "No need. Business is more important." Yang Si smiled meaningfully. Wei Si's expression softened slightly. Feng Zhen asked, "Does the Lord have live assassins?" "I caught 2 alive and threw them to the subordinates to deal with. I reckon we'll have good news soon." Although the captured men of sacrifice would commit suicide to keep it a secret, with Jiang Pengji around, how could she let them succeed so easily? The 2 survivors were caught before they could commit suicide. Sometimes, living a life worse than death was more terrifying than death. Even if these men of sacrifice were well trained, they would still spit out the truth under torture. Coincidentally, as soon as Jiang Pengji finished speaking, someone came to report that the 2 survivors had confessed. Jiang Pengji asked, "Confessed? Who instructed them to ambush me?" The person replied, "The Nan family of Fun Prefecture, Nanxing." Jiang Pengji crossed her arms and asked uninterestedly, "The Nan family? Fun Prefecture? I dug up their graves. Why are you making things difficult for me?" Wei Si and the others stared with their eyes wide open. How thick-skinned was their lord to ask such a question? Not only did you dig up their graves, but you also confiscated half of their savings. It would be strange if the Nan family didn't fight to the death. However, they couldn't say this out loud. After all, the Lord still had to save face. Compared to Feng Zhen and the others' brainless protection, Yang Tao and the others reacted more normally. They didn't dare to say it out loud, but they were still muttering in their hearts. Why? Because the order was given by Jiang Pengji, but part of the specific operation was done by Yang Tao's old subordinates, especially the confiscation of the family's assets. Although Yang Tao and the others had a good time and took the opportunity to take revenge for the betrayal of the Nanxing aristocrats, they had also completely offended them. If not, Yan Lin and the others wouldn't have called Jiang Pengji by her name in private. Yang Tao had offended the Nanxing aristocrats, and Dongqing had no foundation. The slightest possibility of rebellion was nipped in the bud. In the future, no matter how Jiang Pengji developed, Yang Tao could only rely on her. He couldn't have the heart to rebel. The Nan family of Fun Prefecture belonged to the aristocrats in Nanxing. They used legal and illegal means to enclose thousands of acres of fertile land. When starving people were everywhere in the outside world, their granary was so rich that it could fatten up countless rats. They had countless tenants under their name. Their savings couldn't even be compared to the former national treasury. Jiang Pengji gave them a knife. The fat she cut off was richer than that of the Tao family, who ran the illicit salt business. They were rich. If Jiang Pengji didn't take advantage of them, who would she take advantage of? They jumped back and forth between her and the other feudal lords. She just took the opportunity to confiscate half of their family's assets and dig up a few graves. That was enough. Digging up graves was indeed immoral. Unfortunately, she was a penniless bandit. She did unusual things at unusual times. Chapter 1630. Jiang Pengji noticed everyone's strange expressions and coughed to ease the awkwardness. Is the evidence conclusive? I'm sure it's the Nan family of Fenzhou. The Nan family of Fenzhou was a large clan in Nanxing. They had money, food, and manpower. Even Yang Tao had to give them some face and respect. In layman's terms, the Nan family of Fenzhou was a sponsor and an investor. They were a proper financial backer. Who wouldn't show some respect to a financial backer? Zhang Pengji didn't play by the rules. She offended the Nan family of Fenzhou as soon as she arrived. She used force to snatch half of their family's wealth. The fertile land they took away was confiscated. Even their ancestors' graves were repeatedly raided. Even a clay figurine would have some anger, let alone the Nan family. The Nan family was furious. Naturally, they planned to kill Zhang Pengji. They checked Zhang Pengji's schedule in advance, bribed their spies, and arranged more than 100 kamikaze warriors along the way. Zhang Pengji didn't know about all this beforehand. No matter how clear she was, she couldn't control every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It was inevitable that there would be omissions. The Nan family could set up this ambush without alerting her. Her arrogance was partly to blame, but it was mostly due to the Nan family's calculations. If Zhang Pengji didn't have the ability to fight 100, it would be a dead end for any other feudal lord. Of course, on the other hand, she dared to be so reckless because she had such strength. If others imitated her, they would most likely die without a trace. If it was another feudal lord, the Nan family's plan would have succeeded. Wei Ci asked, "How do you plan to deal with them?" The words of the kamikaze warriors can't be trusted. Send someone to investigate again. If it's really the Nan family. Zhang Pengji suddenly laughed softly. Her lips opened slightly, revealing a few white teeth. There was an inexplicable white killing intent. If we don't kill them, are we going to keep them alive for the new year? If she didn't let the people of Nanxing see the consequences of trying to kill her, they wouldn't learn their lesson. Exterminate the clan? Exterminate them. No one objected to Zhang Pengji's decision. Even if some people felt that the decision to exterminate the entire clan was too harsh, they would not make their lord unhappy because of this reason. Zhang Pengji's officials, other than the few who surrendered with Yang Tao, were mostly from Dongqing. There were fewer gentry families than commoners, especially those who were trusted by the higher-ups. The commoners had an overwhelming victory. The landowning households had the upper hand in the middle and lower levels, but they also didn't have much say. The similarity between these landowning families and the landowning families of Nanxing was that they were landowning families. Just based on these connections, it was not enough for them to plead for mercy and risk Zhang Pengji bearing a grudge against them. In terms of benefits, the Nanxing aristocrats were not on the same side as them. To sum up, if the clan was exterminated, then so be it. They weren't the ones being exterminated anyway. The Nan family's ending was decided in a few words. Next, it was time to settle the debt of Zhang Pengji's solo activities. Wei Ci and the others did not say anything harsh. They did not even criticize Zhang Pengji. Instead, they reprimanded her until she hung her head low like a teacher. If it weren't for the fact that she was the lord, Zhang Pengji really doubted that these people would ask her to write a guarantee. Why do I feel that in their eyes, my solo activities are more serious than the assassination this time? When Zhang Pengji's stomach was rumbling with hunger, she ate the cold dishes that she had not finished before. Including dinner and supper, there were a total of 3 big buckets of rice. It was already very late. She rarely streamed until so late. The salted fishes had watched her make a fool of herself the whole night, so she forced them to watch her eat. The guys in the streaming room were always full of golden sentences. "Oh Shishu, if you were obedient and didn't stray from the group, the assassination would only happen once. However, you've always been unrestrained. In the future, you'll definitely encounter more than one assassination. Comparing the two, it's naturally more important to control you. Although the streamer is skilled and bold, Wei Ci and the others won't condone you endlessly if you act so recklessly, right? As time goes on, there might be people who can't stand it and become dissatisfied." The salted fishes joked around, but they were also very serious in their suggestions. Ancient strategists were a group of impenetrable goblins. They were very good when they were good, but if something did not go their way, they would simply turn their backs on you. The thinking of strategists was different from that of ordinary people. It was not impossible for them to rebel because they could not stand Zhang Pengji's actions. For example, there was a certain strategist in history who had a bad temper with his boss. He could not stand the boss's actions, so he jumped ship and trampled on her. There was often only a thin line between true fans and haters. If Jiang Pengji continued to court death, it was hard to guarantee that there would not be fans who would turn against her. In fact, many salted fishes in the streaming room had fans who turned against her. They used to love Jiang Pengji very much, but later, because of some unforeseen events, they hated her very much. These salted fishes were like this even across dimensions, let alone people who were in close contact with Jiang Pengji's bad habits every day. Jiang Pengji asked, "Is it that serious?" Many salted fishes who had entered the workplace told her with certainty that it would. If they had such a casual boss, even if the boss was powerful enough to defy the heavens and the earth, they would still jump ship after a long time. It was true that Jiang Pengji was the lord, but she could not let her subordinates accept her unconditionally. The salted fish's words made sense. Jiang Pengji sighed and scratched her head in frustration. In the end, she chose to calmly reflect. One of her strengths was that she was not stubborn. If she was wrong, she was wrong. She would not make trouble out of nothing and insist that she was right. As she reflected, she realized that Wei Ci was really angry. The crowd dispersed. He did not look for her like he usually did, nor did he help her sort out the documents for the next day. He did not even look at her. Even though such awkwardness would not last long, Jiang Pengji was still not used to it. "You Abba. You should." Jiang Pengji knew that the old chief was lurking in the streaming room. She could not help but cover her face and say, "Am I that bad?" "You Abba. What do you think?" Jiang Pengji lay on the porch, her limbs spread wide as she basked in the moonlight. "I'm quite suspicious now. Why did you choose me as your successor back then? After all, I do have a lot of problems." "You Abba. It's rare that you, who always defy the heavens and the earth, would have doubts about yourself." Jiang Pengji choked. "You Abba. Because the flaws do not obscure the gems. You do have a lot of problems, but the 7th Legion is a combat legion, not a logistical legion. The main role of the legion leader is to command and motivate the troops. Didn't you do that well? I didn't ask you to become one with the soldiers or love them like your own children, right? You just have to lead them to victory on the battlefield." "But," Jiang Pengji said, "that way, I can be the commander of a combat legion, but I can't become the marshal, right?" "You're Abba. Thank God. At least you know your place." Jiang Pengji could not help but facepalm. "I suddenly realized something. You once said that this was a test for me to inherit the position of marshal. If I only captured the system and made a great contribution, but my personality didn't change, I would only be rewarded with a great contribution at most. Wouldn't the position of marshal still be mine?" "You Abba. Congratulations, blind student. You've discovered something." Jiang Pengji was speechless. For all, who was the one who painted a big picture for me?" Chapter 1631. Your Abba. Do you think you're still a toddler learning how to walk? Do you need someone to teach you everything? There were some things that would only be effective if they had experienced it themselves and made up their minds to correct it. The Federation does indeed want to nurture you, but if you don't live up to expectations, it's not like they can't do without you. Besides, I've been retired for so many years, I don't want to get involved in the Federation's affairs anymore." Jiang Pengji was speechless. What he said made so much sense that she had nothing to say in response. "Your Abba, this is indeed your chance, but you can't blame anyone if you can't take it." The old chief was the same as before. Jiang Pengji sighed softly and looked at the starry sky without saying a word. She really needed to reflect. "Your Abba. It's not your fault." After all, Jiang Pengji was the successor that she had chosen herself. The old chief was patient with her. She was also clear about Jiang Pengji's strengths and weaknesses. It was not a problem for her to be the head of the army. Regardless of hardware or software, Jiang Pengji was considered top-notch. However, if she went one step further, her original advantage would become a disadvantage. If Jiang Pengji took the opportunity to reflect and correct herself, her future would be bright. "What's not my fault? Your Abba. There's a huge difference between the commander of a combat army and the marshal of the Federation. It's normal that you're not used to it." Jiang Pengji scratched her head. She was suddenly curious. The old chief should be the most suitable candidate for the next marshal, right? Even if he retired, he would still be the most competitive with his experience. I heard you say that you had no choice but to retire because of your health, but the Federation's medical science is advanced. Are there any incurable diseases that they can't cure? Zhang Pengji was suddenly very curious. Why did her old boss give up on the possibility of further advancement? Even if it was because of a terminal illness, where could the medical technology be more advanced than the Federation? In addition, the old general had also mentioned the awakening. He had also revealed that the problem with her body was due to the so-called awakening. Perhaps, she would be able to find her own path from him. Your Abba. You should really review the history of the Federation Army. Zhang Pengji was ridiculed, but she listened attentively. Your Abba. Think about it. Among all the marshals in the Federation, other than a few at the beginning, which one of them came from a combat army? Zhang Pengji was speechless. The old general's words were double standards. He made it sound as if she wasn't from a combat division. Your Abba. Do you think it's that easy to be a marshal? The difference between the two was even greater than the difference between a vassal and an emperor. The feudal vassals only needed to think about how to manage their own land, and it was fine for them to be willful once in a while. However, as an emperor, he had to consider all the people in the world. Every decision had to be carefully considered, because it could affect the fate of countless people. Similarly, the combat corps only needed to fight on the front lines. It was a blade aimed at the enemy, but the marshal was the leader who controlled the entire situation, from the front lines to the rear, no matter how big or small. The requirements of the two were not on the same level. If the army commander's requirement was 80 points, the marshal's requirement was 100 points. Zhang Pengji was speechless. She thought the old chief was going to talk about some conspiracy theory. I'm even more depressed after hearing what the old chief said. Your Abba. What are you depressed about? Zhang Pengji covered her face and said, Does the Federation want to forcibly prop up a piece of mud with only 80 points of professional ability? Your Abba. If that's what you think, you're overreacting. The old chief did not know what kind of person Zhang Pengji was when she first transmigrated, but from the looks of it, she had indeed matured a lot. Any army commander in the Federation was an elite, 1 in a billion. For Zhang Pengji to be able to sit in this position and gain the unanimous approval of the other army commanders, it was not enough to just be good at fighting. Her other hardware and software had to be top-notch. Therefore, there was no doubt about her own excellence. To put it bluntly, what Zhang Pengji lacked was not the ability, but the mentality, responsibility, and attitude. If these were complemented, and the Federation trained and polished her for a few years or more, she would basically be qualified to be a marshal. For example, Zhang Pengji acted alone this time. Even though her original intention was to reduce the casualties of the guards, she put herself in danger. Even though the men of sacrifice could not harm her at all. No matter what, her actions brought worry and trouble to her subordinates. They were sincerely assisting her, but she treated them with such a childish attitude. Sooner or later, something bad would happen. Zhang Pengji liked to be mischievous. An appropriate amount of mischievous would make people feel closer to her, but excessive mischievous would only make people feel disgusted. If she could change for the better, curb her bad habits, and do things with more of a superior's demeanor, it would be considered a blessing in disguise. After reflecting for a long time, the old chief heard Zhang Pengji say one sentence. Sigh, Zixiao must be annoyed. Can you teach me how to coax him? You Abba. Get lost. Quickly get lost. He doesn't learn from his mistakes and doesn't learn his lesson. The Federation will be doomed if we entrust him to this kind of person. Seeing the old chief fly off the handle, Zhang Pengji laughed heartily. It was as if the depression in her chest had disappeared without a trace. She lay in the corridor outside the room and slept for the whole night. In the morning, she was woken up by the maid. Why did I fall asleep here? Zhang Pengji opened her eyes in a daze. The bullet screen in the streaming room woke her up instantly. She forgot to turn off the streaming room last night. 5 million salted fish just stared at her for the whole night. The bullet screen was full of all kinds of complaints. What annoyed her the most was a particular bullet screen. These salted fish watched her sleep to see if she would freeze to death. Where were the promised fans? Each of them was more dedicated than the anti-fans. Zhang Pengji looked at the bullet screen and had an idea. She rubbed her nose and sneezed. Her eyes quickly became misty. My head is a little dizzy. I feel like the world is spinning. She didn't like people guarding outside the bedroom door when she slept. Most of them were outside the courtyard. Therefore, no one realized that Jiang Pengji slept in the corridor the whole night. It was very normal for her to fall sick in such a cold weather. That's right. She planned to use the trick of injuring herself to gain sympathy. Life was like a drama. It all depended on one's acting skills. Jiang Pengji was as strong as an ox. She had never been sick since she was young, but it didn't mean that she couldn't pretend to be sick. During her years as a genetic warrior, disguise was a compulsory course to assist in some assassination missions. Relying on her exquisite disguise, even the doctor was fooled. Wei Si and the others rushed over the moment they heard the news. Of course, Jiang Pengji wouldn't say that she slept outside in the middle of the night. She only said that she caught a cold when she woke up. The first reaction of Wei Si and the others was to question her. When they saw that she was so sick that her face was flushed and her eyes were bloodshot, their words were stuck in their throats. The salted fishes were dumbfounded by what they saw. Doesn't the streamer's conscience hurt to lie to the little angel? It turned out that pretending to be sick and weak was very effective. Everyone had some opinions at first, but now they were worried about her. Chapter 1632. A cold was something that could kill a person if it got serious. If Jiang Pengji did not die in the hands of the men of sacrifice, but instead was beheaded by a cold, it would be too ridiculous. Yan Lin frowned. Zhengzi, don't you think this cold came at the right time? As long as Jiang Pengji handled it properly, the matter would be resolved in the blink of an eye. Yang Tao said, how could she pretend to be sick in front of so many doctors? It's just a minor illness. Who doesn't take some medicine? Yan Lin shook his head. Anything ordinary feels unnatural when it comes to this person. Just as Yang Tao had said, the kamikaze warriors had not harmed her at all, but she had fallen sick that night. Yang Tao laughed. Once bitten, twice shy. Lu Lanting is not that evil. Don't worry, she's human. Yan Lin rubbed his brows and said in a low voice, maybe I'm overthinking. Xiaoyang's suspicions are reasonable. Lu Lanting was ambushed in the morning and fell sick the next day. If the Nan family of Fun Prefecture hears about it, they will probably think that it's a cover-up. If they get caught because of this, the Nan family will not die a wrongful death. Yan Lin could not help but look at his friend. Not bad. This analysis actually made sense. Whether Lu Xi is really sick or not, the Nan family is doomed, Yan Lin said in a low voice. Lu Xi pretended to be sick and led his troops to attack Huang Song's rear. Now he's sick and the Nan family is digging their own grave. What a coincidence. Yang Tao could not help but ask, Xiaoyang, why do you call him by his name in private? Yan Lin said, I'm not the only one. Chen Su and a few of Yang Tao's old officials called him Lord Lu in public, but they still called him Lu Xi in private. Why? It was all because of Yang Tao. It was just a title. As long as Yan Lin and the others were not disloyal, Jiang Pengji would not hold it against them. Yang Tao said, I'm worried about you. Lu Lanting is sometimes broad-minded, but sometimes she's narrow-minded. Yan Lin's heart warmed. He smiled and said, I know what I'm doing. I won't give her a chance to do anything. Whether in the past or now, Yan Lin's interests were tied to Yang Tao's. Jiang Pengji had hurt Yan Lin and weakened Yang Tao. Yan Lin would never allow that to happen. At the same time, Wei Si, who had been in a one-sided cold war with Jiang Pengji for the whole night, blew on the boiled medicine to cool it down and brought it to her. Jiang Pengji couldn't help but feel the bitterness on her tongue when she smelled the medicine, but she couldn't do anything about it. She could only pinch her nose and drink it in one breath. Cough cough. How much gold thread did the doctor put in? It's so bitter, Wei Si said. There is no Chinese gold thread in the medicine. Jiang Pengji said. It's also very bitter. Even the root of the tongue is bitter. Try it if you don't believe me. She pointed at her lips, and Wei Si could not help but turn his head away. Wei Si was well aware that old concubines' taste was naturally not to taste the dregs. I'm sick, but you don't even treat me well. Sad. Jiang Pengji drooped her head and accused Wei Si in a hoarse voice, trying to pass the matter over. Wei Si sighed, and there was some helplessness in his tone. My lord, are you really sick? Jiang Pengji was speechless. Wei Si said, You've forgotten that I've been with you for more than 20 years in your previous life. Whether you're really sick or pretending to be sick, outsiders don't know, doctors and medical officials don't know, but I, as the person who sleeps by your side, know. My lord, are you trying to rely on pretending to be sick to make me forget about yesterday's matter? Jiang Pengji could not help but pull the blanket higher to cover her head. She said gloomily, I'm not pretending to be sick to fool you, Xueqi said. My lord, are you trying to say that you spread the rumor that you have a cold and used it to mislead the Nan family of Fen Prefecture? To lure the snake out of its hole? It was such a coincidence that the Nan family might misunderstand that Jiang Pengji was really dead or seriously injured. In order not to cause panic, they used illness as a cover. When Jiang Pengji returned last night, the sky was already dark, and there was basically no one along the way. Except for a few confidants, no one else knew that Jiang Pengji had become a hands-off boss yesterday. As long as the news was blocked in time, the possibility of the Nan family being deceived was very high. But Xueqi dared to guarantee with his head that this was definitely not the main reason for her pretending to be sick. Others would think carefully before taking action, but she would think about how to make up for the loophole after taking action. She could even deceive everyone's judgment and create an image of being thoughtful and cunning. Her escape route was blocked by Xueqi, so Jiang Pengji naturally had nothing to say. Xueqi said, I'm not saying this to criticize you, my lord. I just hope that you know my attitude towards this matter. No, I should say my attitude towards similar incidents. Back then, His Majesty disregarded his own safety and repeatedly put himself in danger. Although it was also for the peace of the court and to eliminate thieves and trifles, the sacrifice was too great. In the end, when His Majesty had just reached the age of knowing destiny, he was like a dragon in heaven. Back then, I did not have the courage to stop and advise him. It is still a matter of regret to this day. In this life, since you have given me the courage, there are some words that cannot be kept in my heart. There is no harm in saying them out. Jiang Pengji was silent for a long time. She blinked her eyes and looked at him sincerely. I will change. Xueqi's expression softened slightly. My lord does not need to make any guarantees to me. No one can restrain you except my lord. Jiang Pengji was speechless. If she had known that she would end up like this after acting recklessly, she would have thought more before doing anything. If I may be so bold as to say, you are my lord, our backbone, and the future ruler of the world. Your life and death is not only your own business, but also the fate of countless people in the world. Xueqi said, on the battlefield, you are not required to be more capable than a general in charging and breaking through enemy lines, nor are you required to be more resourceful than a strategist. These things are just icing on the cake. If not, they are harmless. To us, the Lord's safety is a miraculous elixir that is more magical than any tranquilizer. Do you understand? Jiang Pengji thought of the old chief's words last night and naturally understood what he meant. Different positions, different roles, and different actions and words were also different. When she was a feudal lord, everyone could tolerate it. In the future, if she did not change when her status improved, sooner or later, there would be discord and discord. Jiang Pengji thought that she had changed a lot. She restrained herself and greatly reduced the frequency of her wandering on the battlefield. However, in the eyes of Xueqi and the others, she still did not do enough. It was good to have a lord who was good at fighting, but how could her subordinates feel at ease if she casually fell into a dangerous situation because of her strong martial arts? No one in this world could hurt her. But what about the Federation? The Marshal, the feudal lord, and the Emperor were similar in some aspects. Xueqi saw that she did not speak, so he softened his voice and said, I am not being bold and presumptuous, nor am I overstepping my authority to restrain my lord, Jiang Pengji said. I understand. I was not very mature in the past. It was my fault. You were just advising me bluntly. Chapter 1633. Jiang Pengji did not reflect on her actions. The Nan family of Fenzhou were like ants in a steamer basket. They were so anxious that their feet were burning. They had put in a lot of effort for this assassination. They had arranged everything properly to ensure that nothing went wrong. They could only succeed. That's what they said, but Lu Shi is very skilled in martial arts. I heard that he has the protection of a miracle. I don't know if those men of sacrifice can succeed. The head of the Nan family was very confident, but his brother did not think so. He had been anxious for a few days.
From the time the plan was made to the day of the attack, his heart was always in the air.
The ominous premonition grew stronger day by day. Even if Lu Shi has 3 heads and 6 arms, can she survive the ambush of more than 100 men of sacrifice? What protection of a miracle! It's just Lu Shi's lies to mislead the public. How can you believe such nonsense? Ridiculous! The head of the Nan family could not stand his brother's cowardice. He disliked his unlucky guesses even more. He had taken a great risk in planning to ambush Jiang Pengji. If he was not careful, he and his family would be smashed to pieces.
Even if he did not show it on his face, there was an indescribable pressure in his heart.
It was suffocating. His brother did not know how to share his burden. Instead, he was cheering for the enemy.
"Elder brother, I didn't mean that." The elder brother, who was almost 50 years old, glared and asked sternly, "If you didn't mean that, then what did you mean?"
The younger brother was speechless.
He knew that his elder brother would not listen to him.
He could only accompany him to wait for news.
More than 100 men of sacrifice had been sent out.
It was like an arrow on a bow. It was too late to say anything.
For the hundreds of years of inheritance of the Nan family of Fenzhou, he could only pray for the success of the ambush.
As long as Jiang Pengji died, the forces gathered by her would fall apart. The external threat would be easily solved. In this way, not only could the Nan family take revenge, but they could also take advantage of the chaos to rise. The hatred between Jiang Pengji and the aristocrats of Nanxing was not ordinary. First, there was the grudge of digging graves and disturbing the ancestors. Later, there was the hatred of confiscating family property and plundering tenant farmers. The loss of money was nothing. They could earn it back in the future. But the loss of face and status could not be forgiven. The Nan family of Fun Prefecture was also a prestigious family that had existed for hundreds of years. How could they tolerate a bunch of scum peeing on their heads? What Hejian Lu family? They were just a small family that couldn't be shown in public and didn't have much of a foundation. They really thought too highly of themselves and even dared to call themselves a landowning family. Ever since Jiang Pengji entered Nanxing, everything she did made the aristocrats of Nanxing detest her from the bottom of their hearts. How are these landowning households? They're clearly shameless bandits. Take the loss of the Nan family in Fun Prefecture as an example. Jiang Pengji not only sent people to dig up a large number of gold and silver artifacts buried with their ancestors in their graves, but also took away the wealth they had accumulated. She also used force to take away their tens of thousands of fertile fields. Even if the Nan clan had used all sorts of methods to seize these fertile lands from the hands of the common people. However, once the things were in their pockets, they belonged to them. If Jiang Pengji snatched them from their hands, she would be a bandit.
It was easy to imagine what his future would be like if he were to make a living under the noses of such a feudal lord.
Those who strike first gain the upper hand and those who strike later suffer the calamity. The Nan family, whose fundamental interests were touched by Jiang Pengji, finally took the risk out of desperation. Reporting, "First Master, Second Master, there's news." The Nan brothers anxiously waited for the news. They waited from dusk until the moon was in the middle of the sky. Finally, they received the secret report from the housekeeper. "Lu Shi is dead?" The housekeeper calmed his rapid breathing and said excitedly, "Lu Shi caught a cold and is seriously ill. He won't see anyone." Cold. The master of the Nan family curled his lips into a cold smile. He caught a cold at this time. Is it true or is he trying to cover it up? He didn't fall sick earlier or later, but he fell sick after the men of sacrifice took action. Only a fool would believe that. Oh yes. Has the men of sacrifice returned? He didn't let the pleasant surprise get to his head. Instead, he asked about the whereabouts of the men of sacrifice. If the men of sacrifice also said that Jiang Pengji was dead, then she was really dead. They haven't returned yet.
The housekeeper suddenly lowered his voice and said, "However, this matter is most likely successful."
The master of the Nan family asked, "What do you know?" The housekeeper explained in detail in his ear and analyzed. According to the news, Yang Tao and his guards stayed outside for a long time before returning. They looked hurried and solemn. I think it's most likely that Lu Shi was careless and went out to hunt without anyone with him. He was ambushed by the men of sacrifice. The men of sacrifice in the manor are all elites, but Yang Tao and the others can't be underestimated. For safety reasons, it's normal that the men of sacrifice didn't report back immediately. The most powerful lord in the world was assassinated. The news would definitely shake the entire 9 prefectures and 4 seas. For the sake of his own life, Yang Tao couldn't let the ambushed men of sacrifice go. He would definitely search all over the mountains and plains. For the safety of the Nan family, the men of sacrifice had to shake off their pursuers. It would take a lot of time to go back and forth. This matter shouldn't be publicized. Send someone to inquire again. The next day, Jiang Pengji was still nowhere to be seen. It was as if the lord who skipped work for 6 to 10 hours a day had vanished into thin air. Not only had Jiang Pengji vanished into thin air, but the reactions of Yang Si and the other important officials were also very strange. It was as if a storm was brewing. Various details were laid out in front of him. The master of the Nan family completely believed that Jiang Pengji was dead. Now that Lu Shi is dead, what's the use of Yang Si and the others sealing off the news? The master of the Nanxing family sneered harshly. Lu Shi has no children. He's an old and widowed woman. Yang Si and the others want to support a new lord, but they don't have a candidate. There are hidden dangers within, and there's an Shui outside. He snorted coldly. He seemed to have guessed that Jiang Pengji's death couldn't be kept under wraps and that the forces under her would fall apart. The Nan family didn't pin their hopes on Shui. Their previous cooperation proved that Shui was also a fraud. It was better to rely on oneself than on others. Rather than placing heavy bets on an unreliable person, it was better to rise up on their own. The Nan family secretly contacted a few aristocratic families that were on good terms with them and plotted in secret. At the same time, they sent people to quietly spread the rumor that Jiang Pengji might have died. They used this to shake the morale of Yang Si and the others. Therefore, similar rumors quietly emerged in the tea houses and taverns. The water army didn't immediately say that Jiang Pengji was dead. Instead, they disguised themselves as passers-by and asked her where she had been recently. She hadn't been seen for so long. Could something have happened? The other water army took the opportunity to take over the topic and slowly set the pace. After 2 or 3 days of fermenting, the rumors began to take shape. Seeing the situation, Yang Si smiled and teased Wei Ci. Zi Xiao has met his match. Wei Ci said, "There's no evidence. His methods are clumsy." Yang Si was speechless. He was indeed the chief coach of the water army, Wei Zi Xiao. His words were domineering. Are we just going to ignore it? Wei Ci said, "As long as my lord appears in front of people, such rumors will fall apart on their own. There's no need to pay attention to them." Yang Si rubbed his chin and said, "The Nan family took action without any evidence. Aren't they afraid that it's a trap? A cornered beast will do something desperate." Wei Ci said, "Whether it's a trap or not, the Nan family is determined to send people to ambush us. There's no room for negotiation." If it were Wei Ci, he would also be afraid that a long delay would bring trouble. The Nan family's choice was very normal. It was right to leave the matter of rumors to Yang Si. Yang Si didn't care much about it. He was more curious about his lord's changes in the past 2 days. He suddenly asked, "Is there anything wrong with my lord?" "What's wrong?" Wei Ci asked. Yang Si pointed to his head and said with a solemn expression, "Everything is wrong. It's as if she's a different person. My lord has been diligent in her administration these days. I wouldn't dare to do this even in my dreams. Zi Xiao, say, could it be that the lord has been possessed by some wild monster?" Chapter 1634. Before Wei Tsong was imprisoned in the back mountain of the Imperial Mausoleum, he had once been a flirtatious youth. He could still remember those years when the mountain flowers were in full bloom. Young men and women chatted happily, drinking elegantly or chatting merrily. They were full of youthful spirit. The night wind rustled the curtains. Wei Tsong leaned against the side of the table and slept lightly. He gradually fell asleep. Today's dream was unusually colorful. Everything became clear. He looked at the contents of the dream and vaguely remembered that this was the Golden Scale Academy. His gaze fell on the waterside pavilion. Seeing a group of youths in blue and white uniforms chatting and laughing together, he could not help but smile. Wei Tsong remembered. So it was that day. Which day? Naturally, it was the day his mother broke the legs of the Minister of Work's son's son.
Wei Song could not help but approach in an attempt to hear more clearly. At this moment, a familiar-looking youth said with a smile, "Tiske,
Do you think that the Minister of Works is Xueqi's mother? She actually broke into the academy with such a thick stick and dragged her son out to break his legs. I was scared to death." The youth was also the son of a court official. He shared a table with Xueqi, the son of the Minister of Works.
When the Minister of Works rushed in and dragged his son out by the collar, he was scared out of his wits.
"I don't know if she's his mother or not, but it's doubtful if Xueqi is his son." The other youth opened his folding fan. His face was slightly round and immature, clearly the appearance of Wei Song when he was young. His brows were brimming with vitality, and there was no sign of the loneliness he had experienced after so many years. The Minister of Works is such a talented person, so why is his son so unworthy of cultivation? In my opinion, it's good enough that Xueqi only had his legs broken by his mother. She didn't kill him out of consideration for their blood relationship. Xueqi was the son of the Minister of Works, Bai Yuexia, and her husband, Shi Zhong. Because Xueqi was the only male in the family, he was unruly, spoiled by his father and grandmother. He acted arrogantly and often bullied the ordinary students of the academy. Wei Song was only the concubine's son of the grand tutor. He had naturally been bullied by Xueqi and harbored resentment in his heart. The youths were curious. "Wei Song, do you know the inside story of Xueqi being beaten?" Everyone was very surprised. The little tyrant Xueqi's leg was actually broken by his own backer. This could be said to be the news of the year. The wooden stick that Minister of Works Bai Yuexia used to break her son's legs was as thick as a strong man's arm. Why was the little tyrant so arrogant and despotic? Wasn't it because he had a mother who was the Minister of Works? Xueqi's father. The two of them had already separated 800 years ago. Xueqi's father, Shi Zhong, was even more useless. Naturally, I know some inside information. Xueqi deserves this. The youth said, "Xueqi has mediocre looks, mediocre talent, and mediocre looks. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be likable, but he has roots." Although the Minister of Works was there to correct and supervise him, it wasn't easy to be a strict mother. Xueqi was instigated by his family to leave his biological mother. In the end, he made a big mistake. Even a barbecued pork is better than him. Young Wei Song continued, 2 days ago, an imperial censor reported to the Minister of Works, saying that she didn't teach her son well. She allowed her son to force women into prostitution, commit violence on the streets, and cripple people on horseback. The Minister of Works returned to his residence to investigate and confirmed that the matter was true. In a fit of rage, he beat his son with a rod. "How did you know this news?" Young Wei Song said, "Heavenly secrets cannot be revealed. There's always a way that I know." Seeing his dream self reveal the childish and gloating smile unique to youths, Wei Song's lips curled into a bitter smile. He clearly remembered that because of this matter, he had been punished by his father when he was young. His father heard that he was gossiping behind someone's back and criticized others. He said that this was not the conduct of a gentleman and punished him to copy books. The young Wei Song was in his rebellious period. His father's indiscriminate punishment made him very indignant. How was it that he wanted to make things difficult for Xueqi? It was clearly Xueqi, the little tyrant, who privately bullied and humiliated Wei Kong. How did he humiliate him? He cursed him to his face for being concubine Tang's son, saying that his status was lowly, and that he didn't have the right to chat with a student from a good background. Not only did he humiliate his background and his mother, but he also humiliated his father's defeat in the imperial court several years ago. More than once, Wei Song was blocked in a remote corner of the academy by this little tyrant. He suffered these grievances, but he didn't dare complain to his father. Although Xueqi's words were unpleasant to hear, there was one thing he was right about. His father was only the grand tutor, and he was only concubine Tang's son. If his father sought justice from the Minister of Works for him, it would implicate his father's already bad official career. As the saying went, birds of a feather flocked together. The little tyrant, Xueqi, was a hedonistic son of rich parents, and his scoundrelly friends weren't good people either. Wei Song's background was lowly, but he was ranked among the best. He was often used as an example by his teacher to attack these slackers, imperceptibly attracting a lot of hatred. They knew that Wei Song was easy to bully and had no backing. They often joined forces to embarrass him, and verbal humiliation was considered light. There were a few times when they got into a conflict. Wei Song was alone and weak, and his opponents outnumbered him. He was punched a few times. The place where they fought was very hidden, and they were very careful, not leaving behind any evidence. Wei Song's heart was only filled with anger and hatred. Every time this happened, he couldn't help but resent his background, but there was nothing he could do. He could only swallow the bitter fruit. He didn't dare tell his father, afraid that he would make things difficult for him. Fortunately, he had a few peers he was on good terms with, and they became his only channel to confide in. These peers were none other than the sons of his father's elder brother, Wei Song's cousins. In terms of age, Wei Song was about the same as them. In terms of seniority, Wei Song was their uncle. Now that he thought about it, it was the care and persuasion of these good friends that slowly alienated the young Wei Song from his father. The young Wei Song coldly watched the scenes that flashed through his dream. The scenes that had once made him angry and resentful couldn't stir up any of his emotions at this moment. The young Wei Song saw his younger self being locked in a room copying books 20 times. He stubbornly refused to admit his wrongs to his father and stubbornly refused to stop writing. He copied from day to night before finally falling into a deep sleep. TSK. His temperament is quite like mine. Very stubborn. The young Wei Song's pupils constricted in shock. He saw the door being gently pushed open, as if afraid of disturbing the person inside. A tall woman stood outside the door. Time hadn't left many traces on her face, but her aura had become more restrained with the passage of time. This subject has failed to teach. The young Wei Song saw his father, whom he hadn't seen for many years, enter the room behind the woman in a green robe. His words seemed to be filled with emotion. Don't ask for forgiveness so easily. I've seen many people ask for forgiveness during the day. Are you going to do the same? The woman rebuked him, but her tone was very gentle. She bent down and picked up Wei Song, who was sprawled on the table, and gently placed him on the bed. She looked lovingly at the youth's eyes. At the end of the day, it's because I, as a mother, wasn't diligent enough. I didn't know that an academy student would commit such vile acts. Since your majesty has said so, shouldn't this subject apologize with death? The man's eyes were filled with apology and self-blame. He had raised Wei Song for so many years, but he hadn't realized that his child had suffered so much at Golden Scale Academy. If he hadn't found out by chance, he didn't know how long he would have been kept in the dark. He didn't know how to make up for it, even if he wanted to. The woman said, "You and I are both at fault. It's not your majesty's fault. Your majesty has a myriad of affairs to attend to every day. Just government affairs take up 16 to 16 hours. How can you have the extra energy to keep an eye on your child's matters at the academy?" The man helped young Wei Song tuck into the blanket and said softly, "The matter with the Minister of Works. Her son has committed so many mistakes. It's already benevolent of her not to take that little beast's life." The woman sneered. "Is my son also someone that little beast can casually insult? If Bai Yuexia doesn't break his legs, I'll take my saber and chop off his head." Bai Yuexia raised her rod and broke her son's legs in public. On the surface, it was to punish and teach her son a lesson, but in reality, it was the woman's instigation. The imperial censor criticized Bai Yuexia for several days in a row, and the woman also had the intention of dealing with him severely. The intelligent Bai Yuexia naturally knew what to do. Was it more serious to have his legs broken by his mother or to have his head chopped off by the emperor in a fit of rage? Choose for yourself. Although Bai Yuexia didn't know of Wei Song's past, she had followed Her Majesty for many years and understood Her Majesty's intentions. She was serious. The man sighed softly and tucked Wei Song's scattered hair behind his ears with his fingers. The woman said, "Golden Scale Academy should also rest and reorganize. If something like this happens again, I'll cut off their parents as well." It was originally a place for students to study, but she didn't expect such a bullying scandal to appear in the Golden Scale Academy just a dozen years after it was established. Of all things, bullying Wei Kong. She simply didn't want to live. The woman said she wanted to reorganize the Golden Scale Academy, so she would definitely reorganize the entire academy. In that case, CI and Fusho will find an opportunity to have a good talk and console him. The woman nodded. Yes. The young Wei Song watched everything in his dream. His eyes were sore and swollen, and 2 streams of hot tears rolled down his cheeks. So that was the case. When Wei Tsong was young, he was bullied by his classmate, the little bully. However, after the Minister of Works, by Xueqi, personally broke Xueqi's legs, those bastards became obedient and no one came to provoke Wei Tsong again. At that time, Wei Tsong naively thought that by Xueqi's actions had a deterrent effect. So this was the truth. His mother was busy every day, yet she still took time out of her busy schedule to help him vent his anger. His father had also tried to talk to him and console him. However, the young Wei Tsong was willful and rebellious. He had long been instigated and bewitched by others, so he couldn't listen to his father's nagging and lecturing. If he could turn back time, he wouldn't have said those hurtful words to his sister, nor would he have been instigated to harm his parents. Vaguely, Wei Tsong heard a familiar call from the horizon. He struggled to open his eyes and found Ning Wanyue kneeling to the side, looking at him with concern. Wanyue? What happened? Wei Tsong heard his voice hoarse and his face was wet. Was Lang Jun a nightmare just now? Ning Wanyue used a handkerchief to wipe away the tears on his face. Wei Tsong lowered his head and leaned on her shoulder. The candlelight elongated the shadows of the two snuggling together. Chapter 1635. Jing Rong, do you have the guts to tell this to the Lord? Just because the Lord was diligent in governing, they suspected that she had been possessed by a wild spirit. Wasn't this indirectly saying that the Lord had been too lazy in the past? Even if Yang Si was telling the truth, the Lord did not like to hear it. If she really knew about it, Wei Si was worried that the weeds on Yang Si's grave would be 3 feet tall. I don't have the guts. I don't dare to do it. I was wrong. Yang Si quickly waved his hand. His desire to live had once again saved his life. Wei Si said, My lord has grown up. It's our good fortune. In his previous life, His Majesty had only started to work diligently after he had ascended to the throne. He was like a student who had wasted a whole summer vacation and was frantically rushing to finish his homework in the last few days. He had started to change early in this life, so he expected that his future situation would be much better than his previous life. At the very least, he would be able to avoid alienating his subjects to the greatest extent. Wei Si's sentiments came from the bottom of his heart, but Yang Si could not help but ridicule his prehistoric power. Grown up? The age at which people of the same age are going to propose marriage for their children? Yang Si glanced at Wei Si with a strange look in his eyes and smiled awkwardly. Grow up? Lord is getting old at this age. Wei Si. There was no need for his lord to make a move. He wanted to send Yang Si to paradise now. Even though Zhang Pengji always said that she was a slacker in her studies and that her cultural courses were the lowest among all the commanders, it did not mean that she was the slacker in everyone's impression. Sabanan, Peking University is still alright, said that Peking University was still alright, so was Peking University really just still alright? To ordinary people, it was still an existence that they needed to look up to. Similarly, when Zhang Pengji said that she was a slacker, it was only in comparison to people of the same level. Once she started to correct herself, everyone would be able to experience the crushing power of their lord in all aspects. Yang Si and the others were happy for less than 2 days before they complained incessantly. Zhang Pengji could usually finish the government affairs that normally took 3 days. What should she do with the remaining time? Naturally, it was to bring forward the matters that would happen in the next 4 or 5 days. As Zhang Pengji's subordinates, Yang Si and the others had to keep up with the pace. The faster the pace, the more pressure they were under. At this moment, Yang Si, Feng Zhan, and the others missed the days when their lord was a hands-off boss. Since her lord was a hands-off boss, she didn't delay her work. Now that she was in her workaholic mode, she was practically going to f***ck someone to death. In the past, I indulged myself in pleasures and neglected government affairs. Fortunately, you did not abandon me and have been tolerant until now. From now on, I will not disappoint you. Zhang Pengji's words were a positive promise. Not only did she admit that she had been distracted by playfulness, but she also promised that she would change. As a lord, she calmly admitted her mistakes to her subjects. Just this magnanimity alone was admirable. Yang Tao's old officials, who had been biased against her before, now looked at her in a new light. Of course, some people were gratified, while others expressed doubts. They thought that Jiang Pengji's popularity only lasted for a short period of time. Who asked her previous image to be so deeply ingrained in people's hearts? Not only these people, but even some of the salted fish thought so. They never expected Jiang Pengji to be serious and do what she said. Qing Feng Wen Shu. The originally calm and mischievous host has suddenly become a leader. I'm not used to it. Aod Leming. Really? Why do I feel that the host still likes to smile so much? Which leader would be like her? Boss, I want a carrot. Who said that being serious in speech and manner is the style of a leader? Tudu Feichio. I feel that the current host is more in line with her identity. Hippie fooling around is indeed very close to the people, but it is not always good to be close to the people. There will always be people who think that being close to people with power is equivalent to having power. Not everyone is self-aware. The host is friendly to them, but they feel that the host is easy to bully and does not have the dignity that a ruler should have. Once the subjects feel that the ruler has lost his dignity, they will overstep and even trample on him. There is no such phenomenon now because the host is still a warlord in troubled times. She has a strong murderous aura. No matter how cheeky she is, it can't hide the fact that she has killed countless people. But in the future, when the world is stable and the people live and work in peace, there will always be people who are blind and only remember the host's closeness to the people. They will forget the host's ruthlessness and then do something that oversteps. Comfort will erode a person's vigilance and they will forget their previous caution. Diwu Luo. You're right, boss. Being close to people with power and mistakenly thinking that you have power is a deep-rooted bad habit of insatiable greed. This reminds me of the babysitter case that caused an uproar a few years ago. The employer gave the babysitter a high salary and let her eat at the same table with them. He gave her red packets on holidays and helped the babysitter's son find a job. The employer treated the babysitter so well that the babysitter felt that she was superior. She stole and abused the child. In the end, because of a conflict, she wanted to kill the employer. She brought people to rob and kill the employer. There are countless similar cases. On the whole, the idle people were mostly supportive. Jiang Pengji gathered her thoughts. She had the intention to hide it, so she did not appear in public for several days. She had been recuperating from illness. Only a few trusted subordinates could see her. There was no doubt about the loyalty of Yang Si and the others. The spies on the Nan family's side naturally could not find anything. When they did not receive any news from the kamikaze warriors, the Nan family was initially a little shaken. No matter how careful the kamikaze warriors were, once they succeeded, they would get rid of the pursuers and return as soon as possible. But there was no news at the moment. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. When they heard that Jiang Pengji had been sick since that day of winter swimming, they were not sure. Their hearts were like wild grass straddling the wall, swaying left and right. The news of Jiang Pengji's death in an ambush among the people became more and more intense. Wei Ci, the chief instructor of the Navy, not only did not come forward to suppress it, but he also sent people to add fuel to the fire. Not only did it make the people believe it, but even some officials who did not often see Jiang Pengji were also shaken. Especially Yang Tao's former subordinates. A few people secretly tried to find out what Yang Tao had said. What did they want to find out? Of course, they wanted to find out if Yang Tao had taken the opportunity to rise again. As a feudal lord, how could he be willing to bow down to another person? Of course, because the news of Jiang Pengji's death in an ambush had not been confirmed, when these people tried to find out, they were very vague. It could not be used as evidence even if it was spread out. Yang Tao took into account their past friendship and sternly reprimanded those people, dispelling their thoughts. He knew very well whether Jiang Pengji was dead or not. The ambush of more than 100 kamikaze warriors could not hurt her at all. If they had any ulterior motives under her nose, they would not even know how they died. Yan Lin, the shrewd man, deliberately reminded Yang Tao not to reveal that Jiang Pengji was still alive, but he could not say that she was dead either. He had to be vague and ambiguous. Yang Tao suddenly understood, and his face looked awkward. Xiaoyang, are you worried that we have a mole among us? Yan Lin sighed. Whether the mole is one of us or not, we have to clear our name as soon as possible. Jiang Pengji was caught red-handed by the kamikaze warriors. Someone had to be a mole for the Nan family and pass the news to them. On the day of the incident, only Jiang Pengji, Yang Tao, and their guards were there. If Jiang Pengji's people were not bribed by the Nan family, then there was something wrong with Yang Tao. Chapter 1636. The Nan family chose this time to make a move on you because they want you to be their scapegoat. Regardless of whether the assassination is successful or not, you are the most suspicious person. If you want to clear your name, the only way is to help Lord Lu. Lord Lu. You don't need to do anything, but you don't need to do anything wrong. Yan Lin asked Yang Tao to help Jiang Pengji cover up the lie to clear his partner's name. Besides, Jiang Pengji was also aware of their every move. She knew better than anyone else what those old officials with ulterior motives had said and done to Yang Tao. Yan Lin asked Yang Tao to do this because he wanted to prove his innocence. There were too many twists and turns. Yang Tao didn't need to understand. He just needed to do what he was told. Yan Lin would take care of the rest for him. Yang Tao secretly bid farewell to his former minister, worry written all over his face. He said, "I don't know how many spies I have around me. Why do they have to come after me?" Yan Lin said, "People in troubled times have no choice. Zhengzi doesn't want to get involved, but you can't avoid these things just because you don't want to. There would always be something that would force people, whether they were forced or willing, to walk on this thorny single-log bridge. It could be morality, ideals, protection, desire, power. Yang Tao did it to protect his family. What about Jiang Pengji? Even if there are thousands of people, I will go." Yang Tao was confused. "What did you say?" "There are thousands of paths. Everyone has their own path, big or small, public or private. There is no such thing as high or low. You can follow your heart and do whatever you want. Thousands of paths lead to the same destination," Yan Lin said with a smile. "I'm just curious. What was Lu Shi's original intention for walking on this path? Was it for the greater good or for love? No matter how I think about it, I only feel that this sentence seems to be the most suitable." Yang Tao blinked. He didn't understand. Yan Lin put his hand on his forehead and said, "To put it simply, Lord Lu is a man with great ambition and a big heart." Yang Tao smiled. It's rare to see Xiaoyang praise someone like that. What a high compliment. Yan Lin shook his head. Our paths are different. Yan Lin didn't want to risk his life just to watch this kind of person. He didn't want to go all out and join in the fun. Using a marathon as an example, Yang Tao divided the entire 40-kilometer race into 8 segments. He only had to run 5 kilometers each time, and Yan Lin could take his time. Contestant Jiang Pengji, on the other hand, wanted to finish 100 kilometers in one go. 40 kilometers was only her interim goal. Yan Lin admired her courage and ambition, but he didn't have the energy to finish the race with her. Yang Tao rested his chin on his hand. "Xiaoyang, do you think I should confess to Lu Lanting and ask for her forgiveness?" After all, they were old officials. Their relationship over the years was not fake. Yang Tao also did not want Jiang Pengji to settle scores with them. Yan Lin looked down. There's no need. Lord Lu won't do anything to them. At most, he'll scare them a little. Overall, it's more of a scare than a real danger. Between husband and wife, there were dozens of times throughout the year when the thought of separation would pop up. Their teeth and tongues would even fight, let alone between the monarch and the minister. He did not believe that Yang Si and the others had not thought of strangling their lord to death when Jiang Pengji repeatedly stood them up. However, it wasn't like they could put their thoughts into practice. They could just beat them up and educate them. There was no need to kill them all. Yang Tao let out a no sound and felt relieved. Yan Lin said, "If it's possible." Yang Tao turned to look at him. "What?" "Don't leave your words unfinished." Yan Lin added, "Zhengzi will try his best to confiscate the Nan family." Anyway, Jiang Pengji had borrowed Yang Tao's hands to confiscate many of the Nanxing aristocrats. She had offended them all. Digging up graves, robbing people's wealth. Jiang Pengji bore half of the blame, and Yang Tao bore the other half as the executor. There was no need to worry when there were too many lice. There was no harm in wiping out the Nan family. If the Nan family died in Yang Tao's hands, not only would they stand firm, but they would also be cleared of suspicion. Yang Tao let out a no sound and did not think too much about it. He just smiled and squinted his eyes. "I heard that the Nan family is rich. That's a fat sheep. It's a good job indeed. I wonder if I can get it." It was an unspoken rule in the industry to seize some of the loot during a war. Many generals had made their fortunes by doing this. Now that there was still a war to fight, it would not be easy to raise a family when the world was at peace. Of course, as long as you ask. As a former feudal lord, Yang Tao's identity was a shortcoming, but it had its advantages. For example, if he took the initiative to perform meritorious deeds, no one could compete with him. Why? Of course, it was to appease Yang Tao and satisfy his small requests without affecting the overall situation. Yang Tao rejected the temptation of the former officials. Without a backbone, they could only sigh and give up. They continued to observe. The Nan family could not sit still. They joined forces with a few aristocrats who had a grudge against Jiang Pengji to stir up trouble. Unfortunately, they died before they could succeed. Their conspiracy was only at the theoretical level when Yang Tao and his men discovered it. The letters and testimonies that they found were all preserved. The idle people were stunned by the operation. Jungwa Lauda Lauda. No. Shouldn't the streamer continue to pretend to be sick and dead? When the Nan family comes out with their troops, you will jump out and slap them in the face at the critical moment. They were only at the theoretical stage, and you already took action. It's not satisfying enough to slap them in the face. What was this like? It was like Jiang Pengji's eviscerating hand cut to a 5-minute trailer of an 81-episode political drama. Basically, the Nan family united the aristocrats. Just as they were about to go on stage, Jiang Pengji kicked them off the platform. The pace of this drama was as fast as the reincarnation of a hungry ghost. Even instant noodles lasted longer than it. One of the idle people asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Yewu Yenling. So, why did the streamer pretend to be sick and dead? To raid a few more houses, Jiang Pengji said. Didn't the Nan family unite 6 aristocrats in Fenzhou? They died a worthy death. Why did they have to wait for the fire to burn down the house before putting out the fire? It was better not to have this kind of hero reversal. Jiang Pengji watched the fire burn a few books with cold eyes. The smoke sounded the alarm and the small fire was put out. The small fire that the Nan family stirred up was the small fire that did not amount to anything. She sneered. Didn't the Nan family curse me for robbing their family property and digging up their ancestral graves as bandits? Heh, I spared their lives out of kindness and did not care about my own well-being. Then I will take the lives of their entire family. I will kill the chicken to warn the monkey so that the later generations will see the consequences. The Nan family was just a clown in her eyes. She did not take them seriously. It was just that they thought too highly of themselves. They jumped up and down and did not let others have peace. If she did not set a role model, did the people of Nanxing really think that she was a soft persimmon that could be trampled on at will? With the fall of the Nan family, the aristocrats of Nanxing should calm down a little. If they still did not calm down, Jiang Pengji could only set a trap for them and kill them until they all shut up. As for the spy. Chapter 1637. Everyone thought that the spy was on Yang Tao's side. Even Yang Tao himself was so worried. Unexpectedly, the final investigation revealed that Jiang Pengji had a problem. The spy bribed by the Nan family was not a trusted official. He was not even considered a mid-level official. He was just a small official who had no sense of existence but could grasp some of Jiang Pengji's whereabouts. Jiang Pengji did not know whether to be angry or glad when she heard the news. She was angry at this person's betrayal and deception. She was glad that the person who made a mistake was not the trusted official. When Wei Ci learned of this, he was really relieved. Although the emperor in the previous life was different from the lord in this life, the nature of the two was still the same. They hated betrayal the most. If a small character betrayed her, then so be it. The lord's anger was like a storm that would stop after a while. If the spy was a familiar face to the lord, then there would be no end to this matter. She would deal with it extremely ruthlessly. A typical example was Xueqi's rebellion in the previous life. After 2 or 3 years of allegiance, no one expected this rebellion. The impact was also quite far-reaching. When the emperor mentioned Xueqi in his later years, he still hated him and had the urge to dig his grave and flog his corpse. It was difficult for the emperor to raise troops in the previous life, but he did not suffer many losses. It could be counted on one hand. The one that left a deep impression was when Qiguan Rang assisted the old lord, Prince Changsho. When the emperor was at the front line, he led the troops and almost destroyed the emperor's nest. The other time was when Xueqi secretly instigated several middle-level generals to rebel.
When the emperor was in a stalemate with the enemy, he used false information to trick the emperor into leading 500 soldiers into Jinqichuan. There were still 7,000 soldiers lying in ambush in the Jinqichuan Valley. Xueqi had planned for this for a long time. His plan was flawless. When everyone discovered the rebellion and led troops to reinforce the emperor, a day and a night had passed. TSK. If it weren't for Thief Lu's stupidity, courage and arrogance, it wouldn't have taken you so long to realize that something was wrong. Xueqi's mockery was not unreasonable. The story of the wolf coming was often told. When the wolf really came, everyone could not believe it. Similarly, the emperor led the vanguard and frequently used the unconventional tactics. After a long time, everyone got used to it and their vigilance was greatly reduced. When she was plotted against by her trusted confidant and fell into danger, the civil and military officials in the tent did not react in time. Xueqi thought that His Majesty would definitely die. Even the people in the tent thought so. The military camp was preparing for the funeral. Unexpectedly, the people searching for His Majesty's body followed the bodies of the rebels and found His Majesty sitting in a daze in the middle of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Xueqi had never seen that scene before, but he could imagine it from someone else's retelling. From the valley to her feet, the short distance of 1,000 feet was filled with countless broken limbs and remains. Blood gathered into a blood-red trickle. The pool of blood converged in one place, and the yellow mud on the ground could not absorb all of it in time. His Majesty, who had always been high-spirited, showed a rare look of disappointment. His eyes were red and bloodshot. Xueqi betrayed us. Xueqi replied in a low voice. Yes. Death by 1,000 cuts. His Majesty took a deep breath and added expressionlessly, I'll do it. Xueqi asked her, My lord, you don't need to bring Xueqi here for interrogation. Why did he betray us? Betrayal is betrayal. When he did this, he was already a dead man. His Majesty mocked in a hoarse voice. I have no interest in his growth story. What kind of past did he have, what did he go through, and what did he do? Is this the reason why he betrayed me? Xueqi was silent. Even if I don't interrogate him, I know why he did this. It was most likely for his old master. His Majesty sneered and said, He was so loyal to his old master, so I fulfilled his wish. He was willing to plot for his old master for many years to assassinate me, so he was also willing to bear the punishment of death by 1,000 cuts for him, right? Of course, in the end, Xueqi did not die by 1,000 cuts, but he was killed by His Majesty herself. His corpse was hung in Jinqichuan and could not be buried. The generals who accompanied Xueqi were not so lucky. They were almost all killed by His Majesty in one breath. His Majesty reprimanded whoever pleaded for them. During that time, everyone was in danger. Even if the counselors tried to persuade her with emotion and reason, telling her that killing so many generals at once would cause her to lose a lot of strength and ask her to think twice, they still did not have the determination to save His Majesty. His Majesty was determined to kill this group of rebels and traitors, even if he was willing to suffer a great loss of strength. Xueqi remembered that after the Zhang dynasty was founded, a few officials who were on good terms with Xueqi wanted to take advantage of His Majesty's good mood to ask for mercy so that Xueqi's corpse could be buried. In the end, those officials were reprimanded by His Majesty. They were all ordered to be suspended from their duties and go home to reflect on themselves for 2 months. Until Xueqi drew his sword and committed suicide in his previous life, Xueqi's corpse was still hung in Jinqichuan. From this, it could be seen that His Majesty's attitude towards the betrayal of a trusted official was that he would bear a grudge for a lifetime. Therefore, Xueqi was glad that the traitors this time were minor characters. The Nan family and the gentry clans that the Nan family secretly colluded with were all wiped out by Yang Tao and his troops. The traitors were publicly executed by 1,000 cuts. This shock lasted for more than half a month before it finally subsided. Obviously, not much time had passed, but everyone had the illusion that it was a lifetime ago. The gentry clans of Nanxing, Fenzhou, and Jiangzhou were even more cautious. They were dispirited and listless, not daring to jump around for a short period of time. This was because they realized that the superiority of the gentry clans did not work in front of Jiang Pengji, a bandit tyrant. Her capital to establish a foothold in this chaotic world was not controlled by the gentry clans. She did things unscrupulously, committing murder, arson, and looting with a clear conscience. She was a smelly, hard, and stubborn rock in the latrine. The gentry clans, as precious goose eggs, collided with her. The gains did not make up for the losses. They could not afford to provoke her. Could not afford to provoke her. The chaos on Jiang Pengji's side had just calmed down, but a new storm was brewing in the other two places, affecting the situation of the entire world. One was Qiguan Rang and Sun Wan of Zhanjiang Pass. When these two black-hearted people got together, their black-bellied index was off the charts. They would plot against whoever they wanted. The other was in Xue's side. His beloved concubine, the Princess of Xichang, was diagnosed to be more than a month pregnant during the new year. The new year was coming. And Xue, who had been suffering from an unmentionable illness for many years, had successfully gotten his beloved concubine pregnant. This was double happiness. And Xue was ecstatic. In his joy, and Xue rewarded the three armies to celebrate. Everyone was happy and harmonious. However, Nie Qing of Zhongzhou was not in the mood to celebrate the new year. The gloomy atmosphere of the Nie family was a stark contrast to Xue. Nie Qing had experienced the deaths of his father and father-in-law, as well as the betrayal of his cousin, Nie Yang. This allowed him to grow rapidly in a short year. Sadly, the speed of Nie Qing's growth could not keep up with the changes in the situation in Zhongzhou. Speaking of which, it made people sigh. Thinking back to when Nie Yang was still around, Nie Qing was the target of everyone's fawning. Chapter 1638. Outside, there were enemies eyeing covetously. Inside, there were hidden dangers. Everything was in chaos. The increasing pressure and the ever-present schemes caused Nie Qing to lose weight day by day. Not long after, he was so skinny that he was only left with bones. When all these heavy burdens fell on the young man's shoulders, his fine black hair turned white in just a few short months. Not only that, Nie Qing would often fall into a trance, his haggard appearance making people feel bitter. Who would have thought that this thin and frail young man in front of them was a high-spirited and carefree noble son of a landowning household 2 years ago? Anyone who saw Nie Qing's transformation couldn't help but sigh. However, no one would give up their ambitions just because they sympathized with Nie Qing. Even if Nie Qing had the intention to unite all the forces within Zhongzhou and form an alliance to resist Jiang Pengji's forces, would those who flaunt their seniority listen to Nie Qing? To them, the Nie family was like a starving camel that was still bigger than a horse. Nie Qing was still a stumbling block in their way and had to be removed. Even if someone was willing to temporarily stop fighting for the sake of the big picture, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wan were not just for show. How could they allow Nie Qing to reunite the scattered forces of Zhongzhou? As soon as Jiang Pengji led her troops to Zhangzhou, the two of them got together and formulated a series of plans against Zhongzhou. After picking and choosing, they finally decided to secretly support a puppet force. Although it was a puppet faction, it had a certain amount of connections and resources in Zhongzhou. It was a local faction that was born and bred in Zhongzhou. Back then, if it weren't for the fear of the Nie clan's despotic power and Nie Liang's methods, the leader of this force wouldn't have so easily submitted. TSK, you say that you're subservient, but you actually have the heart of a tiger. Qiguan Rang smiled as he read through all the information about this person. He said to Sun Wan curiously, "It's a pity that his heart is higher than the sky, but his life is thinner than paper. If he was so ambitious, why didn't Nie Yang deal with him before he died? If we leave such a disaster alive, even if we don't make use of him, he will become a huge problem for Nie Qing in the end." Sun Wan didn't even bother to bat an eyelid. Although Nie Yang is talented, he is not a god. Zhang Hao was ambitious, but he was also smart. So many ambitious hidden dangers had been eliminated by Nie Yang, allowing Zhang Hao to slip through the net. Either Zhang Hao's schemes are deeper than we expected, and he even deceived Nie Yang's calculations. Either this person's ambition doesn't match his ability, and Nie Yang doesn't take him seriously. Sun Wan wasn't too worried about Zhongzhou. After his lord's torment, Zhongzhou had already been beaten half to a pulp and had become a fish on the chopping block. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "Zai Dao is right. Which category do you think Zhang Hao belongs to, Wanjing?" Qiguan Rang did not answer. The two old foxes looked at each other and smiled. Those who had been tricked by them did not know what would happen to them in the future. Feng Yi could barely understand what they were saying, but Sun Lan, who was not good at scheming, was still confused. Junior has a question. He was a studious student. If he didn't understand something, he would ask. Now there were elders to guide him, learn more, and ask for guidance. When he could take charge of things by himself in the future, who else could he count on? Sun Wen asked, "What is it?" Sun Lan said, "Military advisor Qiguan said that Zhang Hao has the heart of a tiger and a wolf. He won't be willing to be a puppet. If we support him, will we really not be bitten?" It was too embarrassing to be reared and trained by a dog, and then be bitten by the dog in the end. Sun Wen smiled but did not speak. Qiguan Rang asked Feng Yi, "What do you think, Rongli?" Feng Yi said, "Military advisor Sun also said that Niel Yang's calculations left Zhang Hao out. Junior thinks that Zhang Hao belongs to the latter. Ambition and ability don't match." Qiguan Rang asked again, "What's the reason?" Feng Yi said, "Although Niel Yang is Nie Qing's father, he spoils his son like he kills his own. If he helps Nie Qing clean up even the small gravel before he dies, he won't be able to become a practice target for Nie Qing to use magic stones on. This isn't really helping him. It's harming him." Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen didn't react. Feng Yi continued, "Moreover, since the two military advisors have chosen Zhang Hao, Junior boldly judges that Zhang Hao will not have the chance to grow into a dog that bites back. Therefore, Junior is not worried. If these words came from someone else's mouth, it would inevitably sound like flattery." However, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen had watched Feng Yi grow up. They were well aware of her temperament. Qiguan Rang said, "I originally thought that you and Feng Zi didn't really look like father and son, but now that I see it, there is one thing that you two share the same origin." Feng Yi asked, "What is it?" Qiguan Rang said, "Clever." Feng Yi didn't use a long explanation to reason and analyze. She only used the simplest information to deduce a conclusion. Although there was some element of opportunism, turning complicated things into simple things was also a kind of skill. This fellow Feng Yi has a bright future. Feng Yi smiled bashfully at the good-natured teasing of her uncles. Qiguan Rang and the others had finalized their plan. As a puppet being supported, Zhang Hao didn't think of himself as a puppet being controlled. His cooperation with Qiguan Rang and the others was mutually beneficial. Their positions were equal. Qiguan Rang and the others could plot against Zhongzhao through him. He could also obtain support through Qiguan Rang, accumulate resources, and then counterattack when he matured. Both sides had their own ulterior motives. To use an analogy, both sides were peacefully shaking hands and signing a contract on the surface, but behind the scenes, they were sharpening their knives. Qiguan Rang was waiting for the right time, while Zhang Hao was enduring hardships to gain courage. With the secret support of Qiguan Rang and the others, Zhang Hao gradually annexed a lot of territory and slowly gained confidence. He could even ignore Nie Qing's dispatches and orders. Under Qiguan Rang's instructions, he even caused Nie Qing a lot of trouble, sowing discord in the alliance plan proposed by Nie Qing. Zhang Hao's advisor was a little worried about the current situation. "General, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen under Lu Shi's camp are both her confidants. She left the two of them at Zhanjiang Pass with ill intentions. Cooperating with them is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. We might as well reconsider this matter." Zhang Hao waved his hand to interrupt his advisor. He sighed heavily and said, "Do you think I don't know this? However, this is our only chance to get rid of the Nie family. It wasn't easy for Niel Yang to die, and now his son has climbed over my head. He's just a naive and incompetent brat. What ability does he have to order me around? I know Qiguan Rang has ill intentions, but I still have to try." The advisor was also aware of Zhang Hao's ambition, but he still felt uneasy. To Zhongzhao, Zhang Hao's actions were treason and treason. If the aristocrats of Zhongzhao found out, not only would they lose the hearts of the people, but they would also be reviled by their descendants for thousands of years. Was it worth paying the price of eternal infamy for a moment of ambition? Chapter 1639. Since Zhang Hao was so confident, the advisors who liked to flatter naturally boasted brainlessly. They had the same unfounded confidence as Zhang Hao. Or rather, they had never seen the combination of Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen. They did not have a concrete understanding of how scary these two people were. The advisors who were not willing to flatter naturally did not think highly of Zhang Hao's idea. Didn't Zhang Hao check his opponent's achievements before asking a tiger for its skin? Needless to say, Qiguan Rang did not have a strong presence, but if the things he had done were to be shown, it would be extremely frightening.
What about Sun Wen? Sun Wen's presence was much stronger than Qiguan ranks. Let's not talk about the unlucky people in the north borderline first. Let's talk about a more recent example. Jiang Pengji had caused Niel Yang's halberd to sink into the sand, and Sun Wen had contributed a lot. Which fool would treat Sun Wen as an ordinary old man when he schemed against the enemy without batting an eyelid? The combat power of these two people added together was not as simple as 1 + 1. However, no gambler was willing to listen to words that were not beneficial to them. Zhang Hao was that gambler, confident that he could bite off a large piece of meat from the hands of the banker who was cheating. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that Zhang Hao, the fat sheep, was about to be slaughtered by the banker, but the gamblers who placed their bets did not think so. Anyone who prevented them from placing their bets was an enemy who prevented them from getting rich overnight. Therefore, the suggestions of a few advisors who were rational were thrown to the back of Zhang Hao's mind. The advisors' suggestions did not cause much of a splash when they had more people against fewer people. When Zhang Hao tasted the sweetness of the bet, he cared even less about the advisors' honest words that were unpleasant to the ear. Haha, it's rare to see a brat like Nie Qing speak softly. Zhang Hao placed Nie Qing's letter upside down on the table. He stroked his beard and revealed a somewhat carefree and proud smile. When Nie Qing's father, Niel Yang, was still alive, Zhang Hao was always afraid that Niel Yang would settle accounts with him. For so many years, he lived with fear and trepidation. In order to curry favor with Niel Yang, he even used a roundabout foreign policy to curry favor with Niel Yang's relatives, such as Nie Qing. In terms of age, he was a full 10 years older than Niel Yang. In terms of seniority, he was one generation higher than Niel Yang, the same generation as Niel Yang's father and Nie Qing's grandfather. A few years ago at Nie Qing's wedding, he had sent a large gift to Nie Qing, but he had received 2 replies. One was a normal thank you letter. The writing was very official, and it was obvious that someone else had copied it on his behalf. There was no sincerity in it at all. The other was Nie Qing's personal reply, but the contents made Zhang Hao so angry that his face turned ashen. In the letter, Nie Qing tactfully pointed out that Zhang Hao, as a county magistrate of a small place, should focus on the livelihood of the people and benefit the people. He should not plunder the wealth of the people to fill his own pockets. Following that, he converted the generous gifts that Zhang Hao had sent into silver and confiscated it. When Zhang Hao found out about Nie Qing's actions, he was instantly enraged and secretly cursed Nie Qing for being a hypocrite. Why was he scolding her like that? Nie Qing's father, Niel Yang, was a ruthless person who would even kill his own family. In order to develop his influence and fight for power in the Nie family, his hands were not clean at all. The things he did were much more ruthless and dark than Zhang Hao. As Nie Qing's father, since Niel Yang was such a righteous gentleman, righteous as the wind, shouldn't he be the first to slap his father in the face? In the end, Zhang Hao was ridiculed by the other party. Comparing Niel Yang and himself, and then looking at Nie Qing's hypocritical actions, Zhang Hao bore a grudge against Nie Qing. He had sent a generous gift, but had been scolded by the groom that the gift had not come from a proper source. Now that the tables had turned, Zhang Hao was elated. After his mockery, he picked up the flipped letter again and read each word carefully, as if savoring that wonderful taste. General, will Nie Qing's side detect it? Zhang Hao asked in response. Detect what? So what if he does? Without Niel Yang's protection, without Wei Yong's schemes, Nie Qing is just a puppy that has not been weaned. So what if he barks at people? Can he bite me to death when he's fierce? In other words, Zhang Hao did not think much of Nie Qing. The equipment that Niel Yang had left for Nie Qing before his death had been stripped clean by Jiang Pengji. What kind of storm could this fierce puppy do? The advisor said worriedly, Nie Qing is not a threat, but if he reveals the fact that General is secretly conspiring with Lu Shi. There was also a chain of contempt between the gentry. Because Zhongzhou was once the strongest of the 5 countries, the gentry also had an inexplicable sense of superiority. Dongqing was in the middle and lower reaches of the chain of contempt. Their attitude towards Jiang Pengji was neutral and repulsive. In addition, Jiang Pengji had killed so many of Niel Yang's elites and generals. Most of those generals were inextricably linked to the gentry of Zhongzhou. New hatred and old hatred naturally made them even more disgusted. To put it lightly, Zhang Hao's actions were helping an outsider. To put it more seriously, Zhang Hao was a traitor who had committed treason and would be collectively targeted by the gentry of Zhongzhou. It was not that Zhang Hao had not considered it, but in the face of benefits, what was a crisis worth? Furthermore, don't worry. Nie Qing won't say anything because he has no evidence, Zhang Hao said confidently. This child that Nie Liang gave birth to really doesn't look like his son. Nie Qing does things by the book and is very dumb. Without solid evidence, he won't casually slander others. I have been very careful in my cooperation with the people from Dongqing and did not leave any traces. Even if Nie Qing wants to reprimand me, he can't. The advisor said, Nie Qing's temperament is indeed. It was not that Nie Qing was too naive, but his thinking was different from the feudal lords in troubled times. He was more of a gentleman. If Nie Qing had been born in the prosperous times, it would have been a matter of time before he became a famous scholar with the name of Righteousness and Righteousness. It could only be said that Nie Qing was born at the wrong time. He should not have been born in troubled times. The advisor suggested that Nie Qing strike first and gain the upper hand. He should take the lead and label the disrespectful Zhang Hao as a traitor. He could use the method of borrowing others' strength to make Zhang Hao a target and let others attack him. He could use this to curb Zhang Hao's momentum. Regardless of whether Zhang Hao had really committed treason or not, it would at least teach him a lesson and let him know how to restrain his arrogance. Nie Qing was indecisive. He had his own thoughts. It would be fine if Zhang Hao is not wrongly accused. If he is wrongly accused, it will inevitably affect the confidence of the alliance. Nie Qing sighed. Ever since the Battle of Zhanjiang Pass, everyone's expression has changed at the mention of Lu Shi and they have lost the confidence to resist. It was not easy to restore some morale. If we slander the alliance now for colluding with the enemy, I don't know what others will think. It will be hard to avoid panic, and the people's hearts that have gathered will scatter like a plate of loose sand. The advisor's thoughts were more radical. The focus of his thoughts was on how to suppress and curb Zhang Hao's momentum and arrogance. He did not think much about the possibility of slander. Nie Qing's focus was on the irreversible consequences of accidentally slandering Zhang Hao. Chapter 1640. The advisor was well aware of this and could only use the deceased Nie Liang and Wei Dan to force Nie Qing. Indeed, everything has its pros and cons. However, regardless of Zhang Hao's innocence, his rise will do us more harm than good. My lord, please reconsider. Nie Qing sighed in his heart. He really did not want to waste his strength in internal strife and benefit Qiguan Rang, who was eyeing him covetously. Thus, he repeatedly tolerated the feudal vassals who were pressuring him. Little did he know that his tolerance for the greater good, in the hearts of those ambitious people, would instead prove his incompetence and cowardice. Let me think about this matter for another night. I'll give you an answer tomorrow. Nie Qing sat in front of his father's token for an entire night and gave his official a reply the next day. What? Zhang Hao received the news one step ahead and was stunned. At the same time, he felt his face hurt. Half a month ago, he had confidently said that Nie Qing was incompetent and would not make things difficult for him without evidence. He did not expect to be slapped in the face half a month later. Not only was Nie Qing going to make a move, but he also planned to kill him so that there would be no evidence. To put it bluntly, he wanted to kill Zhang Hao, who had been jumping around recently, as a sacrifice to the heavens. Kill the chicken to warn the monkeys, and establish his might. If Zhang Hao had not planted eyes and ears in the Nie family, he would not have received the news 2 days in advance. I really underestimated this little beast. He dares to bite me without any teeth. Zhang Hao cursed in his heart. He was very sure that Nie Qing did not have evidence against him, but he did not expect Nie Qing to change his character. Not only did he make a move without evidence, he actually planned to sneak up on him. Regardless of whether Zhang Hao was innocent or not, he would first behead him and randomly accuse him of a crime. One of the younger advisors could not sit still and said, General, the only thing we can do now is to avoid the brunt of the attack. Zhang Hao scolded unhappily. Is there something wrong with your brain? How do you have the face to give me advice with that brain of yours? Avoid the brunt of the attack? Nie Qing, this little beast, does not even intend to let me live. What's the use of avoiding the brunt of the attack now? The more we avoid it, the more it proves that we have a guilty conscience and become Nie Qing's burden. Nie Qing is heartless, so don't blame me for being unjust. Of course, it's an eye for an eye.
Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen chose Zhang Hao because they knew that his temper was more unyielding. When he was underestimated, Zhang Hao knew to tuck his tail between his legs. Once he gained the upper hand, Zhang Hao's tail would start flying. Not only would he face people head-on, but he would also be headstrong. Qiguan Rang and his brother's original intention was to incite internal strife in Zhongzhou so that they could sit on the sidelines. The conflict between Zhang Hao and Nye Qing was the fuse of internal strife. The fuse had been lit, but whether or not the fire of this internal strife could burn so fiercely that it could destroy the entire foundation of Zhongzhou would depend on how Qiguan Rang and his companion would add fuel to the fire and drag more people into it. Zhanjiang Pass. Qiguan Rang could not help but smile when he received the news that Zhang Hao had made the first move. "Zai Dao, you've won this round." Qiguan Rang's words had a double meaning. He was referring to both the game of Go in front of them and their predictions of Zhang Hao and Nye Qing. Qiguan Rang's guess was closer to the truth. Although Zhang Hao's momentum was fierce, he could not fight Nye Qing head-on. He could only choose to strike first to gain the upper hand. Taking advantage of the fact that Nye Qing had not sent the news of the purge to his subordinates, he led his troops to deceive Nye Qing's territory, Gaofeng City. He tricked the city guard into opening the city gates. Once the city gates were opened, the guard was killed when he was unprepared. Gaofeng City changed hands in less than half a day. By the time Nye Qing received the news, Zhang Hao had already won 2 cities. The crowd was in an uproar. Qiguan Rang's guess was not far from the truth. Sun Wan, on the other hand, was slightly off the mark. He had underestimated Zhang Hao's ambition and greed. "I'm getting old. An old man's brain is getting duller and duller. I can't compete with young people." He spoke modestly, but there was no displeasure on his face. He happily took out a few golden melon seeds and gave them to Qiguan Rang. These two were not only playing Go to compete, they were also playing for stakes. Small bets were pleasing, but large bets were harmful. Using the game of Go as a bet had tainted elegant actions with the smell of dung. Which dung? They regarded money as dung. Qiguan Rang laughed. "Zai Dao is old but strong. It's still too early to say such things." Sun Wen smiled faintly and didn't comment. After the game, the two cleaned up and planned to discuss another game around the stove. It was snowing heavily outside, but it was warm and cozy inside the room. Zhang Hao is a qualified chess piece, but the entire game can't be supported by one chess piece. Similarly, if Zhongzhou wants to become completely chaotic and waste its resources on internal strife, Zhang Hao alone won't be enough. Qiguan Rang held a glass cup of wolfberry tea and added a spoonful of thick honey to it. He lamented the corrupt life of the rich while enjoying himself. Nye Qing's personality isn't like his father's, but he's not the same. Isn't this a surprise? Zhang Hao can only be considered a whetstone in front of him. Wasn't that right? Niel Yang had counted everyone but left out Zhang Hao and the others. Wasn't he planning to use Zhang Hao and the others to sharpen Nye Qing? From this, it could be seen that in Niel Yang's calculations, Zhang Hao was no match for Nye Qing. The two old foxes gathered together to play Go and chat. With a few words, they had decided the future of Zhongzhou. How could they escalate the internal strife in Zhongzhou? Not only did they have to drag more people into the water, but they also had to ensure that Zhanjiang Pass wouldn't give them external pressure. Without external threats, the signs of internal strife had risen again. With a gentle breeze to help the fire, wouldn't this game of Go be set up? Sun Wen took the opportunity to throw out a bombshell and drag those who had been watching from the sidelines into the water. This bombshell had something to do with a certain neutral power in Zhongzhou. This power was originally attached to the Nye family. After Niel Yang's death, they took advantage of Nye Qing's unfavorable position to become independent. Sun Wen's bombshell became the fuse for this neutral power to go against the Nye family. The bombshell was about the good deeds done by a legitimate son of the Nye family during the Nye family's heyday. How do you know? Qiguan Rang was very curious about what other gossip Sun Wen had in his hands. No, a trump card. Every time he played it at the most critical moment, it would achieve unexpected results. Sun Wen said coldly, "As a father, I naturally pay more attention to what the murderer of my son has done." The descendant of the Nye family who killed Sun Wen's only son had dealings with many landowning women. Some had done so willingly, and some had done so unwillingly. His only son, Sun Lai,
had won first place at the assembly. Although the descendant of the Nye family bore a grudge against him, it wasn't to the extent that the other party would break his legs out of humiliation and send him to the border on a groundless charge. Sun Lai had written an article at the assembly, and the content of the article had poked at the other party's sore spot. An article? Qiguan Rang had a respectful attitude and hadn't investigated the death of Sun Wen's only son. Thus, he didn't know exactly what had happened at the time. Hearing Sun Wen mention it, he asked a few more questions. What about the article? Sun Wen's mouth twitched. An article that used something to mock others, attacking the chaos in the landowning families. It hoped that the foppish sons who had a disgraceful style of conduct would sober up and reflect on themselves. They would respect themselves and not insult their families and bring shame to their ancestors. However, different people have different interpretations. The author may not have intended it, but the reader has. The descendant of the Nye family mistakenly thought that Lai had seen him having an affair in the backyard and used it to threaten him. That's why he wanted to kill him. Chapter 1641. Sun Lai's death was caused by many reasons, and not just one or two. First of all, the direct descendant of the Nye family was arrogant and domineering, and he could not tolerate others suppressing his limelight. However, Sun Lai's article not only suppressed his limelight, but also stabbed straight at his sore spot, causing him to mistakenly think that Sun Lai was threatening him with an illicit affair. Finally, there was also Nye Yang fanning the flames from the side, pushing his only 50% killing intent to 10%. Sun Wen's heart was filled with hatred. Even in his dreams, he wanted to kill the murderers involved one by one. He dug 3 feet into the ground and investigated the events of that year again and again to ensure that no fish escaped the net. The person who killed his only son must die. Even his grandson, Sun Lan, did not know that after so many years, Sun Wen had not walked out of the pain. Every time he woke up from a nightmare in the middle of the night, he could not help but silently read the information he had sorted out, word by word, as if he wanted to use it to engrave everyone in it into his bones. In order to make his revenge perfect, he made countless assumptions and plans. So, this person is also a pawn of Zidao? Qiguan Rang was speechless. Fortunately, the old man's son Wan was an ally. If he was an enemy, he would have a headache. Who knew when Sun Wen began to scheme and set up a trap? He could even bring out a small, invisible person who had no sense of existence to make use of. He was really afraid of him. To be honest, this drive was similar to how his lord squeezed people to death. Sun Wen knew what Qiguan Rang was afraid of and could not help but laugh. The old man in front of you is just a mortal. He is no different from ordinary people in life, death, love, hate, and separation. He is not a god, and he will not be able to calculate everything. If Sun Wan was so powerful, his only son Sun Lai would not have died so tragically. These words came from the bottom of his heart. From Sun Wen's point of view, he just had more time and thought more than others. He tried to make up for the loopholes as much as possible, which seemed more comprehensive. Qiguan Rang laughed. Zidao is being modest. Sun Wen said, these years in Dongqing, I don't know much about the situation in Zhongzhou. I don't have any useful pawns on hand. In other words, he could only make full use of the limited pawns to achieve unlimited value. Only then would it not be a waste. Furthermore, it is the father's fault to raise and not to teach. The teaching materials of the Golden Scale Academy had profound meaning. Just 6 words were enough to express the responsibilities of a parent. That bastard raised a shameless slut who had an affair with another man before marriage. He even indirectly caused the death of my son. Humph, of course I can blame this on him. Sun Wen's logic of venting his anger on others resonated deeply with Qiguan Rang. The two men's worldviews were particularly in tune. Qiguan Rang had taken Sun Wen, who was a generation older than him, as a confidant. Sun Wen was delighted. When the old man turned his head and saw his grandson's aggrieved face, he suddenly remembered the important matter at hand. His ultimate goal was not to become Qiguan Rang's friend, but to become his in-laws. It's okay, Lon Lon. Grandpa is quite satisfied with Qiguan Rang's look at you. He's so smart, there's no way he wouldn't understand hints. Sun Wen sounded a little guilty. Sun Lon asked, what if military counselor Qiguan pretends to be confused?
Sun 1. If that was the case, there was really nothing he could do. One family's daughter is sought after by many families. If you want to marry a good girl, how can you not suffer some setbacks? Sun 1 comforted his grandson and encouraged him at the same time. Doesn't the academy always teach that sincerity can open metal and stone? How can it be so easy to get the daughter of someone else? Sun Lan's eyes were filled with resentment. A good girl was hard to find, but hard to find also had different levels of difficulty. Obviously, Qiguan rank's difficulty was hellish. Young people who were not smart enough should not hit a wall, or they might even lose their lives. Sun Wen sighed. No father-in-law in the world is easy to please. If Lon Lon was a girl, Grandpa wouldn't have handed her over so easily. Qiguan Rang didn't know about this? How could that be? Sun Wen got along with him exceptionally well. Apart from the fact that their worldviews matched, the other reason was that Sun Wen wanted to be on good terms with him. In terms of worldviews, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, and the others were also on the same level. Why didn't Sun Wen get along with them? Wasn't it because these people didn't have daughters of the right age at home, and Sun Wen's grandson had his eyes on his daughter? He was indeed pretending to be confused. His daughter wasn't even of marriageable age, and he had other plans for his daughter's future. Whether Sun Lon was a qualified husband still needed to be observed carefully. If Sun Lon wasn't suitable, Qiguan Rang wouldn't relent even at the risk of offending Sun Wen. They were all important officials under the Lord, and no one was inferior to the other. If the two of them really became enemies, Qiguan Rang might not be at a disadvantage. Of course, if Sun Lon was qualified, the two families would become in-laws. That would be a strong alliance, and there would be no harm in it. The two old foxes' calculations were making a lot of noise. The target of their calculations didn't feel comfortable at all. When Sun Wen bore a grudge against someone, he naturally wanted to kill him. The person that Sun Wen was staring at with his death stare was surnamed Zhou. His daughter had married into the aristocratic family, and after she reached marriageable age. Both the Yin family and the Zhou family were originally attached to the Nye family and relied on others. They were third-rate families with small clansmen. The ancestors of both families were of low birth, and they only had today's prosperity after several generations. They knew that development wasn't easy, and they cherished their feathers. What Sun Wen wanted to do was to tell the leaders of the two families that the aristocratic family's wife had affairs with the Nye family's direct descendants several times after marriage, and that the father of her son was unknown. At the same time, he would fan the flames and completely anger the two families' ambitions and hatred. Naturally, he would pull the Nye family's hatred. Originally, it was just the internal strife between Zhang Hao and Nye Qing. Halfway through, Zhou and An got involved, and the situation became even more chaotic. Zhou and An understood the Nye family very well. If they really rebelled and joined the war, Nye Qing would probably be badly battered. Which man in the world would tolerate the humiliation of being cuckolded? A rival in love used his family background to cheat on his wife, and even gave him a son of unknown bloodline. Who could tolerate that? Reality proved that he could really tolerate it. If the Nye family hadn't suffered a great loss, if Zhang Hao hadn't been there, this man could really tolerate being cuckolded and having a son of unknown bloodline in front of power and family interests. Many aristocratic families put interests first. Even if they knew that their wife had been cheated on, and that their son might not be their own, they could still pretend to be ignorant for the sake of interests. The problem was, did the current Nye family still have the power to intimidate others? Without such power, how could Lady N, who had been cuckolded, endure the humiliation of being cuckolded? When Sun Wen's information was sent to Mr. Cuckolded, he immediately went to settle the score with his wife. Chapter 1642. His actions were very abrupt and rude, waking up his sleeping son. His son was so frightened that he started crying. Mr. Green Hat was extremely impatient, and his eyebrows were full of displeasure. The lady was shocked. What's wrong, Lang Jun? Why can't we talk things out? Why scare the child? All of you get out. I have something to say to Madam. Mr. Green Hat suppressed his anger and waved the servants away. After all the servants had left, he asked his wife directly whose son she had given birth to. The lady was a little guilty and confused. She said vaguely, "Why are you suddenly asking this? Could it be that someone is making irresponsible remarks in front of you? Lang Jun knows best who my son is."
Why do you have to accuse me of being innocent? Mr. Green Hair asked. Before you got pregnant, did you have an ambiguous relationship with that animal from Madame Nye? Did you use the gathering as an excuse to have sex? The noblewoman's expression changed drastically, and her exquisite makeup was almost ruined by the shock. Lang Jun, where did you hear such slanderous words about me? It's fine if you don't believe me, but how can you doubt your beloved legitimate son just because of an outsider's words? Mr. Green Hair sneered. It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. You know best whether you did it or not. Maybe you don't even know whose son the child is? I didn't ask you who you had sex with before marriage, but you're still so restless after marrying into Madame N. How can you face me? The more she spoke, the more ashamed she became. Whenever she thought of her legitimate wife being cheated on, the humiliation followed her like a shadow. Before the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was popular in Zhongzhou, relationships between men and women were not conservative. The higher one's status and power, the more so. It was normal for widows with power to keep gigolos. It was normal for unmarried daughters to have 1 or 2 male confidants. The circle of the gentry was more open. However, after marriage, she would have to consider her husband's and her family's reputation and focus on taking care of her husband and children. This was the tacit understanding of the circle many years ago. Of course, after the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women came out, the men of Zhongzhou suddenly became more demanding of women. The unspoken rules that had been considered normal became intolerable. It was like this before marriage, let alone after marriage. Because of this, the husband and wife quarreled. They weren't hysterical, but other than not fighting, they basically didn't leave any face for each other. Since you have so many complaints against me, why did you pretend to be deaf and mute before? Mr. Cuckold pressed her further, and the lady was irritated. Instead of being angry, she laughed sarcastically. You know very well why you are making a scene in my house. If the Nye family is still as dignified as before, even if I have a child with that person from the Nye family, and it's still unclear after marriage, would you dare to fart? You can't even fart. He was afraid that he would tacitly agree that his wife had served him well, so that he could seize the opportunity to gain benefits. I'll be frank with you. Even the pimps in the brothel have more guts than you. Ask yourself honestly, do you really not know the relationship between me and that person? Not even a whisper? What a joke. You probably know something, but you don't dare to delve into it in order to avoid it, right? Why are you pretending to be a man to settle the score with me? If you have the ability, why don't you bring people to kill that person? Let's go now. What kind of hero was he if he didn't have any ability and only knew how to yell at inner house girls? Do you think I'm willing? If I tell you, would you dare to stand up for me because of your power? Coward. Mr. Cuckold's face turned ashen. Why wouldn't I dare? The lady said bitterly. Of course you dare now. Is the Nye family still the Nye family of the past? If it was in the past, would you dare to speak up? Your whole family, old and young, are just the dogs of the Nye family. Today's Nye family is just an old worm with all its teeth pulled out, yet it still occupies the mountain and claims to be the king. You have long been unconvinced and have long planned to rebel and stand on your own. But because of your face, you are unwilling to bear the reputation of betraying the old master and being ruthless. Now that you're questioning me, you just want to use me as a raft to launch an attack on the Nye family. Say one more word? Mr. Cuckold's most secretive ambition was mercilessly exposed by his wife, and he became angry out of shame. Humph, even if you say 10 or 20 more words, I dare. The lady sneered and said fearlessly, with just you alone, even if you rebel against the Nye family, it's no different from hitting a stone with an egg. If you use this matter to get my father's help and use his guilt, your chances of success will be greater. As long as you still need my father, even if I say it for 10 days and 10 nights, don't say one more word. Do you dare to kill me to silence me? I'm asking if you dare. Mr. Cuckold choked on his wife's words. His red eyes surged with complex and vicious emotions. After a while, you don't dare. The lady sneered and raised her hand to straighten her clothes. She walked past him with her head held high and chest puffed out, leaving 2 words behind. Coward. The lady was right. Mr. Cuckold indeed needed his father-in-law's help. Now was not the time to fall out with the Yu family. When he succeeded, he wouldn't have to continue enduring that shrew's humiliation. Madame N and Madame Zhou quickly reached a tacit understanding. While Nie Qing was forcing Zhang Hao to jump up and down, they quickly acted and interrupted the rhythm of the internal fight. Madame N and Madame Zhou were originally attached to the Nie family. The Nie family didn't have their guards up against them, and even gave them a certain amount of trust. No one expected that the former dogs would suddenly bite back. Zhang Hao was the most surprised that Madame N and Madame Zhou joined the civil war. Even though he had acted first and tricked Nie Qing into taking 2 cities, Nie Qing had reacted and taken an effective counterattack. Zhang Hao's foundation was still weak. Even with Qiguan Rang and the others secretly supporting him, he couldn't compete with Nie Qing. He was almost beaten to a pulp. Madame N and Madame Zhou joined the internal fight. Nie Qing's backyard was on fire. Zhang Hao's pressure on the front lines decreased. Not only did he catch his breath, but he also forced Nie Qing, who was at his peak, into a difficult situation. Qiguan Rang and the others surrounded the fire to watch the show. They were in a particularly good mood. They planned to add bricks and tiles to the fire that had been ignited with great difficulty. Nie Qing and the others keenly sensed that something was wrong. They didn't want to be dragged into the swamp of the internal fight. However, Zhang Hao's greed and Madame N and Madame Zhou's ambitions wouldn't give up so easily. The more Nie Qing considered the bigger picture, the more fearless they became. In the end they really fought. Nie Qing understood that according to this rhythm, they would either die from the internal fight between the 3 families or Jiang Pengji would take advantage of them. After thinking about it, Nie Qing chose the latter. Jiang Pengji was an external threat. Zhang Hao, Madame Zhou, and Madame An were internal threats. Nie Qing didn't think he had done anything wrong to them. However, they betrayed the Nie family at their most difficult time and made a counterattack. If he didn't kill these ungrateful people, was he supposed to keep them alive for the new year? Nie Qing didn't want to see his father in the underworld one day and be reprimanded by him for not being able to control his henchmen. Nie Qing was serious. The internal fight became even more intense. Apart from a truce on New Year's Day, there was no end to the fighting. At first, only a few families participated in the war. Later, other forces were involved. The situation was chaotic. Looking at Zhongzhou, Nanxing, and Dongqing, only Jiang Pengji and Anshui were celebrating. Chapter 1643. Jiang Pengji had been in the north for more than a decade. She celebrated the new year according to the customs of the north. This was the first time she had returned to the south. The new year in the south was very different, not only in terms of customs, but also in the environment. The snow in the north had always been thick, but it was not too cold around the new year. It was different in the south. The snow was not thick, but the air was chilly. It was during the war, so the atmosphere was not strong. The streets and alleys were almost empty. Half a month before the new year, Jiang Pengji led people to visit everywhere secretly. She was only relieved when she was sure that the people had been properly settled down. There were many people in the world who obeyed on the surface but disobeyed on the inside. That was why there were scandals of poor supervision and poor implementation. It was not possible even in the future interstellar with the information explosion, let alone in ancient times when communication was extremely inconvenient. The people under her command did not take the people seriously, nor did they take her orders seriously. It was normal for the winter clothes and food to be embezzled and embezzled. Therefore, Jiang Pengji's hands were stained with blood during this trip. She killed along the way, so the local officials spent the new year in fear. They were afraid that Jiang Pengji was secretly watching them. Who knew where she came from? Those who committed lesser crimes were reprimanded from top to bottom. None of the people involved could escape. Those who committed more serious crimes and embezzled more than the standards set by Jiang Pengji were merciful. Of course, it was not that she did not promote people along the way. Corrupt people were hateful and deserved to be killed, but those who did their duty well and even exceeded their quota should be rewarded and encouraged. She recorded the people and things she saw along the way in her mind's account book. Some people should be promoted. It was a waste of talent to stay in their original positions. Some people did not have enough experience. They needed to be honed for a year or two before being promoted. Some people were not as good as the top but were better than the bottom. Rewards were enough. The snow outside is melting. Why is my lord dressed so lightly? Wei Ci did not follow Jiang Pengji everywhere. He stayed to deal with the trifles of the new year. Even if he wanted to follow, Jiang Pengji would not allow it. After all, Wei Si did not have a strong body like hers. If he ran around for a month in the cold season, he would definitely fall ill. I'm not afraid of the cold. Jiang Pengji untied the rope of her straw cape with one hand and threw the name list on the bamboo slip to Wei Si. The paper was light, but it had its drawbacks. If it got soaked in the rain, the ink would scatter. For convenience, Jiang Pengji used a bamboo slip to record and a penknife to carve. Even if the bamboo slip was damp, the words on it could still be preserved for a long time. It was enough for her to bring it back for Wei Si and the rest to copy. Wei Si opened the bamboo slip. The first dozen or so names were all killed by the Lord, and each name was followed by the crime of being killed. The 20 or so names in the middle were reprimanded or demoted, and the last 10 or so names were praised or promoted. Remember the people behind you for this year's new year. Yes, sir. The files of those who were punished or killed are still on the way. It's a long journey, so it'll probably take 2 days to get there. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, in order to come back as soon as possible to spend the new year with you, I've shortened the journey time again. Do you feel touched? Wei Si sighed. I want to be touched, but there are too many things to do this year. I have the heart but not the strength. Every new year, important officials would receive generous rewards. It was a kind of year-end bonus. Officials who had worked hard and performed well in the previous year would also receive it. Other than the important officials, who were personally reviewed by Jiang Pengji, the rest were arranged by her subordinates. In the past, Dongqing, which was a fraction of the later, had a small territory and few officials. It was naturally relaxed during the new year. Now that it controlled Dongqing, the northern borderline, and Nanxing, it had expanded in scale. The New Year's gifts had to be prepared long in advance and sent to various places. In her previous life, Her Majesty did not start this habit until she ascended the throne. From her ascension to the throne until the year of Long Yubin, it had lasted for a whole 18 years. No matter how fierce the battle in the court was, the lower levels of officialdom were still relatively clean. Now it had started early. There was Wei Si's admonition and the enlightenment of the idle people. Even if it was an insignificant year-end bonus, the person who received the reward would be greatly encouraged. At the same time, it could also be used as a warning to those who did not receive the gifts. The types of gifts were relatively simple, such as a set of ink, a knife of paper, a piece of cloth. It didn't matter if there were too many or too few gifts, or if the gifts were too light or too heavy. What mattered was the meaning behind the gifts. This was not only to win over the hearts of the people, but it was also a warning to the many supervising officials. It was to make them constantly alert and not slack off. Especially when they knew that Jiang Pengji would spend a month at the end of the year inspecting the grassroots, they did not dare to be careless. To be able to receive a gift meant that they had done well in the previous year. This killer was very satisfied and they did not have to worry about losing their lives during the new year. As for those who did not receive it, they were naturally trembling with fear, afraid that disaster would befall them one day. After so many years, except for Nanxing who did not know the rules, everyone in Dongqing understood her temperament. Towards those who were derelict in their duties and corruption, she would kill them without batting an eyelid. As long as they were dutiful and diligent in their duties, she was also a magnanimous and benevolent ruler. Every new year, the people would be surprised to find that these parents and officials became extraordinarily hard-working. Their performance in government affairs rose steadily and their efficiency was extremely high. For example, among the New Year's letters sent this year, there was a very interesting content. A small county magistrate who was mediocre but had been in a remote and desolate village for 23 years complained that his old mother was getting on in years. She happened to hear about foreign chong peaches and really wanted to eat them. Even if she could not eat them, it would be good to see them. He also wanted to buy half a caddy for his old mother, but the small county in the 81st level didn't have it and the price of buying it on behalf of others was too expensive. Jiang Pengji felt that this request was not too much. This minor official's performance in the previous year was not bad and he had a good reputation in the local area. Therefore, the New Year's gift was changed from a knife of paper and 2 ingots of ink to a caddy of peeled chong peaches. Not to mention how frightened and surprised the minor official would be when he received the chong peaches, Jiang Pengji was busy until the morning of New Year's Eve before she stopped writing. There were wars everywhere this year. During the winter, she even allocated funds to save millions of people in Jinan and Nanxing.
If it was not for the fact that the Nan family had assassinated 7 noble families in Fenzhou and enriched their private coffers, her wallet would have been empty. The New Year's banquet was not as elaborate and grand as the previous years. It was more like an ordinary family banquet. Everyone gathered for a meal and summarized their performance in the previous year. Compared to her low-key side, Xueqi on the other side was very arrogant. Hua Yuan could hear Xueqi's laughter from afar. He adjusted the expression on his face and revealed just the right amount of puzzlement. He smiled and entered the main tent. I wonder what happy event has made my lord so happy? The bashful Xichang princess was kneeling next to Xueqi. His large palm held the princess's soft hand and he kept rubbing it with emotion. The heavens have not ended my heir. Xueqi's eyes reddened as he spoke. Although he said that the princess of Xichang was just a plaything and did not have the right to give birth to a young master for him, he was still very happy that she was really pregnant. Chapter 1644. Congratulations, my lord. Congratulations, my lord. Hua Yuan bowed with his hands folded. His sincere expression darkened the Xichang imperial concubine's eyes. She grew even more wary. She subconsciously rubbed her flat belly and couldn't help but sigh. She was both happy and sad. She was happy that she was pregnant. Her treatment would be several levels higher. No matter how much Xueqi looked down on her, he would not mistreat the child in her belly. She was sad that she was the imperial concubine of a nation. The first half of her life had been doted on by her father and mother. She had enjoyed all the riches in the world. But in the second half of her life, her country had fallen. She was homeless and had even been treated as a slave by a small feudal lord. She had no control over her children. She had once despised the women in the harem who used their beauty to please men. She had never thought she would be worse than them. The Xichang imperial concubine was not old, but she was very shrewd. Even though she was filled with sorrow, she still wore a gentle and elegant smile on her face. She knelt behind Xueqi. Those who did not know would think she was Xueqi's legal wife. Hua Yuan's congratulations were very ordinary, but Xueqi beamed. He valued Hua Yuan even more now. I should be the one thanking you. That divine doctor is skilled and virtuous. He is truly a divine physician. Xueqi couldn't help but grab Hua Yuan's hand. He patted it as he sighed. Perhaps because he had resolved a matter. He looked radiant. He seemed several years younger. Hua Qing, you have to thank that divine doctor for me. When Lin is born, he will reward you greatly. If not for Hua Yuan's recommendation, Xueqi would not have been able to cure his illness and have his own child. In terms of merit, the Xichang imperial concubine who had given birth was only second. Hua Yuan was without a doubt the first. Yes. Only the heavens knew what kind of willpower Hua Yuan had to deal with Xueqi without batting an eyelid. He wanted to tell the unlucky Xueqi that he could not give him the merit. After all, it was the Xichang prince who had worked hard. After Hua Yuan left, Xueqi reminded the Xichang imperial concubine again. The child is still young. You have to take care of yourself. When Lin is born, you will not be treated unfairly. The imperial concubine felt very disgusted, but she had to show a shy and happy smile. I understand. I will definitely give birth to a healthy child for you. Xueqi was very satisfied. He planned to spread this news so that everyone would feel happy as well. The news of Xichang's princess concubine's pregnancy quickly spread. The officials all congratulated her, and she was so happy that she could only see her teeth but not her eyes. This new year was the most comfortable new year since the disaster of the southern barbarians. Apart from a select few, the other officials did not know that Xueqi had an unmentionable illness. Those in the know included the old officials who had fought alongside Xueqi in the early years, such as the Target brothers he had sworn to when he was a member of the Red Lotus group in Dongqing. Speaking of these 2 sworn brothers, he sighed. Xueqi had been able to call them brothers when he was down and out. Later on, when he returned to Nanqing and started his own business, the aristocratic ways in his bones had completely separated him from his 2 sworn brothers. The 2 sworn brothers had martial prowess and were not afraid of death. In the early years, when Xueqi had no men and no land, they were indeed the trump cards that Xueqi could bring out. The present was different from the past. Was Xueqi still the stray dog of the past?
He was now the vassal of Nanxing and Xueqi. The two sworn brothers were born in the wilderness and were illiterate. They spoke rudely and acted rashly. And Xueqi, on the other hand, was a famous aristocrat who had enjoyed all the glory, splendor, and wealth. The three of them did not grow up in the same environment at all. They did not share the same view of the world. However, Xueqi did not want others to say that he was an ingrate who shared hardships but did not share hardships. Even though the two sworn brothers had fallen behind for many years, he did not abandon them. Instead, he gave them a place to retire and allowed them to live a life where they did not have to worry about food and water. Xueqi felt that he had done his best, but the two sworn brothers did not feel good about it. They thought that they were very important, but as Xueqi climbed to a high position, or as he recovered the glory that he once had, they seemed out of place. They had been marginalized by Xueqi all these years. One of them had even been demoted again and again because he did not do a good job in supervising the rations. Now he was just a bald general. Calling him a general was just a nice way to put it. In reality, he was not even as good as an ordinary centurion. Xueqi was overjoyed. They only had the right to be in the background because of their past hardships. When the crowd of congratulatory people had left, the two sworn brothers finally had a chance to say a few words to Xueqi. One of them was more straightforward. With a hesitant expression, he said, "Big brother, isn't your body? Why does sister-in-law have?" Before he could finish, Xueqi's face turned completely black. The other sworn brother interrupted him with an awkward smile. "Congratulations, big brother. When sister-in-law is pregnant, I will congratulate big brother again. I suddenly remembered that I still have things to do in the camp. I will take my leave first." With that, he dragged his sworn brother away without a word. If he did not leave, did he want to be killed by Xueqi in a rage? Did he not see that Xueqi's face was so black that it was almost green? Men could not stand the humiliation of being cuckolded, much less being questioned by a sworn brother. "My good brother, why are you dragging me away?" "If I don't drag you away, do you want to drag me to death? How did I drag you down?" Big brother obviously cured his body and that's why sister-in-law is pregnant. Yet you're questioning whether his hidden illness has been cured. Aren't you suspecting that the baby in sister-in-law's womb belongs to another man? He was almost at his wit's end. After so many years, did he still not know how to be more cautious? As they followed Xueqi, they became more aware of what it meant to be powerless. It wasn't that they were not brave enough when it came to killing their enemies. It was just that brute strength did not allow one to climb higher in this world. To make an analogy, when Xueqi had just started his business, of course, he prioritized profits. He rushed for sales and income. It was fine for his subordinates to be a group of undergraduates. But when his business expanded and he wanted to expand his business, it was inevitable that he would choose to transform and pay more attention to product quality and the capabilities of the company's personnel. The two sworn brothers were undergraduates. If they wanted to keep up with the pace and not be eliminated, they had to work hard to enrich themselves. They had to work hard to make their abilities catch up with the elites from prestigious universities. Otherwise, what awaited them was elimination. Speaking of which, Dian Yan, who worked under Zhang Pengji, was a typical example. He was a hard-working person who kept learning and kept up with the pace. Dian Yan was lucky. Zhang Pengji, the Lord, gave him directions at the right time. Yang Si, the think tank, was stationed with him in Hu County for 2 to 3 years and gave him special lessons from time to time. Dian Yan learned with difficulty at first, but he also climbed up after much hardship. On the other hand, the two of them were not so lucky. Xueqi did not have the patience. He did not think that their hard work would be very effective. His other colleagues also looked down on their background and abilities. They were unwilling to pay attention to these two uncouth people, let alone give them pointers. They could still stay in the Xueqi group as a customer service and janitor. They could earn a living because of Xueqi's kindness. Chapter 1645. Actually, for the two of them, being a customer service, security guard, or janitor was nothing. No matter what, it was better than squatting in a village and showing off their strength to survive. However, it was difficult to balance it out. Xueqi used to be attentive and concerned to them, calling them brothers and thinking highly of them. But now, he didn't need them anymore. From being Xueqi's right and left arms and confidants, They were reduced to the background, idlers who did chores. This wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the people who used to suck up to them were now stepping on them. Their days were getting more and more depressing. With such a huge difference, it would be strange if they felt good. But they couldn't complain, lest Xueqi heard about it. They only had a little bit of friendship left with Xueqi. If they lost even this, they would probably be beaten back to their original state. Sigh. Let's not talk about these unhappy things. We haven't had a drink together in a long time. He patted the shoulder of his brother and sighed. Sister-in-law warmed the food and wine at home. We're going to drink to our heart's content tonight. Let's go. Both of them were sad people, so they agreed to get drunk together. Unexpectedly, they ran into Lu Zhang, who had lost a lot of weight and was about to return home. The brothers' eyes brightened. One of them called out to Lu Zhang. Military advisor Lu. Where are you going? Lu Zhang's situation wasn't much better than the two brothers. The latter saw it and remembered it. Lu Zhang had sacrificed a lot for Xueqi. The first 2 years were even more difficult. Who knew how much energy and effort it took to slowly open Xueqi's shop, allowing him to enjoy the glory he had today. Now that Hua Yuan, who was more to Xueqi's liking, had appeared, Lu Zhang, the strategist with whom he didn't share the same values, was slowly buried and marginalized. To be honest, Lu Zhang was one of the few people in Xueqi's camp who was willing to look the two brothers in the eye. Thus, they were extremely respectful to Lu Zhang. They would greet him and say a few words when they met on the road. Lu Zhang turned his head and said calmly, "So it's you two generals. I went to congratulate my lord earlier. I'm on my way home to stay up for the new year." Even though there weren't many people in Lu Zhang's house, staying up for the new year was an old tradition. The two brothers looked at each other, cupped their fists, and invited, "We are also alone outside, and it's boring to stay up all year round. Why don't you join us, military advisor?" Lu Zhang nodded in agreement. Festivals like the Chinese New Year should have some popularity, and the more people, the merrier. The two brothers happily led the way. After a few turns, they arrived home. The house was brightly lit, and a beautiful woman had been waiting outside for a long time. "Madam, go and prepare some good wine and dishes. We must drink to our heart's content with the military counselor and the others tonight." The woman nodded and led the two maids to bring out the wine and delicacies that had been kept warm. After eating 2 mouthfuls of food, her sworn brother said, "Sister-in-law's cooking is amazing. I haven't had such delicious food in a long time." The two brothers boasted about their business. Lu Zhang sat at the side and listened quietly. He did not speak for a long time. He had met that madam once. It was said that she was originally the wife of a small aristocratic family. Because of the chaos of the war, she was separated from her family when they migrated. She fell into the hands of the southern barbarians and was tied to the back of a horse as a spoil of war. Whether it was luck or misfortune, the southern barbarians were about to take their spoils of war away to enjoy when they ran into the troops of Xueqi's tent. At that time, Xueqi's career had just started. The two sworn brothers were the most useful generals under his tent. The sworn brother killed the southern barbarian bandits and saved this concubine's daughter. He immediately saw her and brought her back to his tent without a word. From Lu Zhang's point of view, this kind of forced buying and selling was essentially no different from the southern barbarian bandits. Weren't they all bandits? But this madam had accepted her fate, so Lu Zhang could not say anything. He did not like this world. Whether it was men or women, they were all pitiful and weak in the face of evil bandits who took things by force. In the end, they had to accept their fate and treat the other party as heaven and earth. It was truly laughable. Lu Zhang was not a talkative person, so the two brothers did not think there was anything wrong with him. After 3 rounds of wine, their faces were red, and they began to speak with a lisp. Their voices sounded slurred, and they did not control their mouths. Lu Zhang listened and sighed inwardly. No wonder Xueqi was at odds with these two brothers. Secrets could not be kept. Once they drank, they dared to say anything. As time went on, a narrow-minded person like Xueqi would naturally have disagreements. The two were discussing Xueqi's inability to have children due to her unmentionable illness, each saying something about how the other had gotten pregnant. Not only did Xueqi disagree with them, but Lu Zhang also felt uncomfortable listening to them. If the salted fishes were here, they would know why. Because the words of these two brothers were stabbing straight at the G-spot of a straight man. It would be strange if Lu Zhang, who had normal values, could feel comfortable listening to them. After listening for a while, Lu Zhang used the excuse of sobering up to go out to the veranda to look at the snow. The sounds in the room faded away behind him. It's snowing. The bright moon poured down cold light, dispersing the tipsiness on Lu Zheng's body. His swollen mind calmed down again. He had a question in his heart. This question was the same as the two people in the room. How did Shui have a child? How did the child come so coincidentally? Seeing Shui so happy all day, it did not seem fake. Although he was confused, he did not say it out loud like a bore. Lu Zhang still cherished his life. If he angered Shui's murderous intent because of this, wouldn't he die an unjust death? No matter how imaginative he was, he did not expect Hua Yuan to play such a trick. On the surface, he was plotting for Shui, but behind his back, he wanted to kill Shui. Moreover, he did not expect Hua Yuan to arrange for the sewing opportunity to be the elder brother of the Xichang princess. Those with more upright thoughts would not immediately think of something that went against human relations, unless it was someone as observant as Jiang Pengji or someone as schizophrenic as Hua Yuan. As he thought about it, Lu Zhang heard the crunching sound of wooden clogs stepping on the snow. A delicate fragrance wafted into his nose. "Sir." A gentle female voice carried a watery warmth. The lady walked over gracefully and put down a cup of soup to sober up. Lu Zhang declined politely. "I haven't had much to drink, so I won't trouble you." He was not a single person. He could understand women's hints. When dealing with married women, it was right to keep a respectful distance. "Sir, don't be nervous. Lang Jun and third brother are drinking in the room. The two of them are drunk and don't know what's going on here." The lady laughed. Seeing that Lu Zhang was still keeping a respectful distance, she said warmly, "Sir, please don't misunderstand me." The lady secretly looked around the room. Suddenly, she poured the warm soup on Lu Zhang. She raised her voice and kept apologizing to Lu Zhang. Lu Zhang's face darkened. He raised his hand and brushed away the lady's action of wiping him with a handkerchief. He looked angry. "I'm sorry. There are still clothes to change in the residence. Why don't you come to the guest house and change? I'll arrange for a servant to send you away." Lu Zhang did not say anything. He closed his eyes and hid his thoughts. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.